do this in the way that I certainly wish we had, which is to have equity from the beginning. We had an effort that did legalize cannabis and later have worked to build in social equity, but we didn't do it from the beginning. We also didn't from the beginning deal with the issues around individuals who deserve to have their records expunged. We have subsequently now had the law passed where the governor's been able to address that issue. But I have to recognize that the initial program we had still was punitive, actually disabling people from being in the industry who had prior criminal justice involvement. And that worked to the opposite of equity. And the uncomfortable question that we just heard, which is white people have been able to make money after Black people have been incarcerated, that needs to make us uncomfortable. And we in Colorado have been working, and we passed a law last year dealing with, and I've got Kristen here as an expert, home delivery that seeks to build equity in as part of the opportunity. And that's part of what we have to be thinking about as a matter of public policy. How do we address past inequities, expungement? How to enable future opportunities, both as a matter of public policy, but also, and this is where Coach Bailey, I appreciate you convening us, we all need to come together and ask, how do we support that opportunity and true diversity and equity and inclusion in this industry? This industry, given the history, should be a model for what true diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like, both from public policy and from private action and commitment to make sure that we are enabling opportunity. So we need to be vigilant. We need to be uncomfortable. We need to be engaged as we work to advance equity in cannabis and to make cannabis a model for what we can and should be doing elsewhere. So I need to remain impatient. I will remain engaged, and we need all of your ideas and reporting from what's on the ground happening. Where are we seeing hopeful signs? Where are we seeing discouraging signs?
Thank you. Appreciate you, Attorney General Weiser. Roz, your thoughts here? You've been at this for a while. You've been traveling all over the country trying to do the right thing. You've been lifting all of us up, and I'm so proud to be a partner with you on this social equity Zoom, because it says that we have so much work to do, and there's enough room in the space for all of us to be able to do the work. What is your take on the social equity and the challenges, choices, and opportunity in the billion-dollar industry?
Yeah, I thank you so much, John. And I just want to reflect back to Attorney General Weiser. First and foremost, thank you for, I call it owning up, because, I will tell you this, when it came to Colorado, and I'm in Florida, and every state that I went to.
She froze.
And in my,
You're freezing,
because
Roz.
Colorado didn't have that social equity, social justice. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. I think my internet is a little unstable. But anyways, thank you for the acknowledgement, because we have to create model states and model localities so that the new programs that are coming on board not only feel empowered, they feel like they have a shared community, but also they have policy that they're able to institute, as well as create the rules and regulations around that policy to make sure that the execution of a social equity model program or model bill is executed correctly. We've seen too many different states and localities where you have policy put into place. However, the execution has been poor at best. And so that's where I'm interested when we talk about, we can look at the past, we'll look at our current situation, but I'm really hopeful for the future for us to be able to execute and be able to take the intent of these bills and the intent of these policies and make them executionable so that we can see some real traction and real opportunity. I'll tell you this, I was in Arizona this past weekend doing an expungement clinic, and the expungement laws in Arizona are so antiquated. It's ridiculous how tough it was for us to be able just to take people through an opportunity to get their records expunged. If we could just get all the states to get on board and be able to have better expungement type of laws, so that we can take these dings and these marks on people's records and get them cleared, that is something that we can model and we can measure. So it's all about modeling and measuring our results, and let's talk. So thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure if Robert has joined the call yet. Robert Raben. Robert, are you there? All right, well then I'm gonna move straight to Christian Sederberg. And Chris, if you might ask Kate to let somebody know, let Robert know to join us as soon as possible, I'd appreciate it. But Christian, you know, besides being one of my former players, besides being one of the top cannabis attorneys in the country, besides being a proponent from the very beginning for legalization in Colorado, and continuing to be a proponent and advocate for the social equity journey that the state is going through, what is your thought on the challenges, choices, and opportunities that we are confronted with, and maybe even suggestions on things that we could do?
Sure. Thanks, Coach, for having me. And Roz, nice to see you on the camera here, but thanks for also hosting this event. And thank you, everyone, for being here. What an amazing panel. And Reverend Boyer, everyone else, really thank you for your thoughts. And, you know, for further acknowledging Colorado's failures from the beginning. And, you know, it was a long time ago, and it's taken us, you know, we got like a lot of things to do to make up for lost time. I'm really proud of the work that the Attorney General's done, the Governor's done. Right now we have several pieces of legislation working their way through that will hopefully make this expungement issue, Roz, to your point, easier in Colorado, because it's incredibly difficult in certain places without auto expungement and other things to really move the dial. So one of the things we're doing here in Colorado, we're increasing the possession limits that were established under the Constitution with Amendment 64, increasing them to 2 ounces, so that we hope the governor here can engage in a much larger pardon process. That's one of the things that my colleague Jordan Wellington has been working on. And, you know, we keep doing these expungement clinics too. And even though, Roz, it's, you know, so difficult to do every time we get one, and it's unfortunately, you know, you get one through every so often, but every time you get one, to see how much it changes someone's life is incredibly moving. And
It's worth
you know,
it.
absolutely,
It's totally worth it. It's worth it. Yeah.
Absolutely, but we got to do better. And I think that as we watch states coming on, the way they're thinking about these things, you look at New Jersey, you know, you start to look at other states that are considering moving forward with programs, and it's happening fast and furious. The fact that you know, equity is leading the conversation, and the fact that, frankly, I think a lot of people, myself included, have learned a great deal about, you know, what equity is all about. And John, and you know, your better half, as you say, the explanation of the difference between equality, equity, inclusion, I think it's incredibly important. And I think that this education piece is one of the things that I try to focus on. And as we, you know, talk to legislators, talk to federal legislators, I'm flying to DC this afternoon to meet, you know, we have some meetings with some more conservative people. Tomorrow, we got to look for opportunities to really explain it. I wish I was eloquent as you, Reverend Boyer, or you know, maybe I can have your wife join me one of these times, John. You know, but really to hear it and to hear why it's so important and such a unique place for this industry to be, in that we have this federal legal issue that needs to be resolved, and the stated principles underlying that all start with, you know, equity, diversity, inclusion, you know, and really focusing on how do we start from the beginning with getting those dollars into people's hands through the SBA and other things, and you know, other programs, other, you know, trust funds, things like that. But the fact that we're starting this conversation at the federal level, or really leading this conversation, starting with the MORE Act, and now with what we'll see, but Booker Schumer Wyden's bill, all signs indicate that this is going to be what leads the conversation. We've got to start pulling some of those people from the right and the you know, the center right over to the side here, of just doing the right thing. And I liked how you framed it, Reverend Boyer, about reparations just on the war on drugs and the fact that, we're taking away customers from these, from these built-in markets. It's such an incredibly hard issue. You got on one side people that are sort of law enforcement, and I'm a pro law enforcement person, so I believe you follow the laws until the laws change. We gotta reach for like the compassion part as opposed to that logical part of their brain that's who I am. I'm a law enforcement, I'm a representative, or I'm a law enforcement senator. You really got to have those conversations about just pure fairness and understanding equity. And the leader, what Roz and Amber, Littlejohn, and others. Sorry, I don't want to leave anyone out by it because I know there's so many amazing leaders on here. But that work, what we all need to do on the industry side is not try to recreate that work. We need to support the work that good organizations like Black Cannabis Equity Initiative, M4MM, MCBA, all the others. Sorry guys, I wish I could click through my screen because I know Ernest is on here from BIPOC Can and others, but we all got to just, as industry folks, leaders, whatever you want to call it, we have to focus on our organizations and do the right thing. But then we have to support the organizations that have been doing the right thing for a long time here. So again, thank you, Roz, for everything you've done and for hosting this, and John, thanks for putting this together as always. And I look forward to just continuing to work with people to really, why can't this industry lead this issue? I don't see any reason why we can't. I know we're coming from behind, but I'd like to sprint from behind and get out in front of it because I think we have a real opportunity here.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Steve, Christian told me that, Coach, I found a shooting guard. Not only is he a shooting guard, but he's a former playmaker. So he's a combo guard. He knows how to shoot and he knows how to set people up. And so would y'all welcome to his position as the new Executive Director of the United States Cannabis Council and an advocate for cannabis, social equity, and legalization throughout America. Would y'all please welcome Stephen Hawkins. Steve, good to see you. Welcome to the conversation. Share with us your thoughts on challenges, choices, and opportunity in this billion-dollar industry. You take your mute button off. Take your mute button off.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you. So first of all, what strikes me hearing the conversation, especially when we talk about dealing with expungement, de-incarceration, is we are tasked with reverse engineering what has been 50 years of how policing and the racialization around cannabis prohibition has played out in the United States, and the broader construct of how people of color have been targeted by the criminal justice system. I think it will behoove us going forward to even challenge how expungement is done, how we can all work together and not accept, whatever box we've been put in to work on this. Because at the end of the day, John, we're talking about changing, reversing mass incarceration. We have a system in this country that was designed to suck people into prison and create records and was never designed to get them out. And we see that again and again and again. And I say that as somebody who's spent decades of my life working on criminal justice policy. And that has certainly brought me to the work that I do now with all of you, recognizing that we still have these 650,000 arrests every year, recognizing how many lives have been destroyed. So first and foremost, we have to continue the work on expungement, de-incarceration, and challenge the system that has been created around it, because to work on behalf of one or two individuals, incredibly important, but we have hundreds of thousands of people who need to have their records expunged and their lives made better. Second thing, John, certainly economic opportunity, and as folks have been saying here today, we need to first of all support groups like Roz and others, and realize that the work and how it seems to me we are structuring equity today, and the sort of reliance on the commissions that have been formed to carry out regulations My thinking, John, is that those commissions have a big job, but equity needs to not just be in their wheelhouse. Equity needs to be able to stand out, have its own either agency or independent private groups that help to further it. Because at the end of the day, yes, it's licensing, but it's also the resources to operationalize, tax structures, who can participate in the market and who can't. And John, when I think about what we did years ago now around reentry services in the United States, it requires working with the Department of Justice, Housing, Health, Human Services. We have to think of of social equity in a broader construct than just one agency that has oversight of all enforcement mechanisms or regulatory mechanisms being the agency in charge of equity. We have to begin to think about how that gets really done in a way that allows for this kind of cross section of a needs that operators have. So, and the last thing, just to pick up on what Reverend Boyer said, yes, we're talking about redress to communities that have been impacted. I look at the fact that New York now is going to be putting 40% of the money raised from taxes into communities that were targeted during the years of cannabis prohibition. That's the benchmark that all the states going forward should be looking at. And I'll stop there. Thank
you. Adam Goers, CEO, Columbia Care.
Multi-state. John, good to be with you.
Hold on, Adam. Hold on.
Yes, sir.
CEO of a multi-state organization that is doing work all over the country. Adam, we sought Adam out, and Adam was enthusiastic about getting here and sharing what Columbia Care is doing. So, challenges, choices, and opportunity in a billion-dollar business. Adam Goers, CEO of Columbia Care.
Well, John, I gotta appreciate the battlefield promotion to CEO. I am a leading executive, the senior vice president. I have been involved in it for a long time, but even just hearing the challenges that Roz spoke about and Dr. Boyer, I was a young man that got caught up in Arizona, of all places, in the criminal justice system with cannabis. And it's been something that's impacted my life along the way, but the details of how young I was, and frankly, recognizing the color of my skin too, and the opportunities that presented itself, has not held me back as much as it's held back a lot of my Black and brown friends. And that's something that drives me as a progressive every day who's involved in this industry, is recognizing what other folks are going through. And so I recognize the challenges that means, and how companies like Columbia Care are working to help advance policy, but our lawyers also in their volunteer time, like Christian and others, working on expungements, because it comes down to each individual person. New states, I think, are coming up with better ways to push that forward. But John, I think beyond that, the choice is really for us, connected to some of these challenges, is ultimately the financing of businesses and how to be able to get the capital in to actually create a sustainable social equity licensing opportunities. And I think there's macro and micro issues at play there. Certainly a lot of states, Illinois and in New York now, and others, are finding ways to create grants and loan funds. But until we change the federal dynamic here and get a really strong Safe Banking Act that really puts in opportunities for capital, it's a little bit like we're trying to fix it with duct tape. And I think we need that big change to be able to create a sustainable marketplace. Folks can get the financing that they need to build these businesses. And beyond that, I think too, is we're looking at Schumer, Booker, and Wyden and others with the MORE Act. is looking at what kind of federal normalization outside of the things that we all agree on, which is the criminal justice elements, reinvesting in communities, but what are the choices through federal normalization that helps incubate state-based social equity programs to ensure that a one-size-fits-all federal normalization event doesn't wipe away the very opportunity that we're all here to talk about in building new businesses, to ensure that folks that haven't gotten licensed and up and running in Illinois, but certainly ones in New York, but how about the state that wants to come in 3 years, that communities that have been disproportionately impacted there can look to federal normalization and say, that actually made sure that it reserved my right to be able to grow a business, to scale a business, and ensure that it's not just the folks that were in this business early enough before federal normalization that are the ones that get the opportunity. So we're trying to lead through public policy, certainly working with Christian and Stephen Hawkins and others on this call. But I think also as a company, doing our part in numerous states now and partnering with social equity advocate or entrepreneurs who need the insights, need the financing to be able to get up and running and to do it right and to have a sustainable business. And we're looking for more of those opportunities to try to find a market solution here, where we can put our expertise and our capital to use in helping create sustainable social equity businesses.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much, Adam.
Thank you, John.
Your thoughts there on challenges, choices, and opportunity? Amber? Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize you were speaking with me. Challenges and opportunities. I guess that would have.
Challenges, choices, and opportunity.
Yeah, that actually would have been the bulk of what I have to discuss. And one of the challenges I've actually been working on all morning, we are hopefully going to see a vote on safe banking by 4:15 today in the House, addressing a major issue that is having an impact not only on the ability for small minority businesses to compete, but really for states to stand up social equity programs. We're seeing them fall apart all around the country. So I will go back to the state issue, because this is something that I think as an industry, we are at a point where we are in a time of reckoning. We haven't had the first state legalized. We've had sufficient time to learn from the past and what is not working. And so as the AG said, wanting reporting and evidence to that end, MCVA is working on our partners to put together some more comprehensive reports on what's working and what's not working. But we can easily look to some of the things that aren't. And my concern is that if we focus too much on, we want to keep pushing for comprehensive reform, but if we focus on that and say, oh, we can't do all of these other things until we have comprehensive reform, we will not be a part of this industry for two reasons: the access to capital issue, and then two, what's happening around the states is we have small closed markets with licensing caps. We have little access to capital, and that really kind of exasperates the challenges on the state level, because you're looking at companies that are sometimes in the negative when it comes to small cannabis businesses and their profit margins. And the only way to really get to a place that you are profitable is to have the kind of capital that the multi-state operators have, things that allow them to minimize their tax burden, whether that is real estate investment companies, public bonds, tax rebates for being big job creators and having, providing hundreds of jobs into a community. These are all things that are great. And as we normalize the cannabis industry, we want to see, but I think it's really important for us to recognize that you can have the best, strongest sounding social equity language, but if people that are pushing for state laws and people that are creating state laws around equity aren't really looking at whether or not the result is equitable, then they're for naught. If funding for social equity businesses comes in after the if it's funded exclusively by adult use cannabis revenues, then there's no funding to help people get started. If the resources and the framework is directed towards supporting and being favorable to large multi-state operators, then it's really challenging to participate. So while again, we support, and applaud companies for their commitments to social equity, I think it is imperative that we are looking around the states and the policies that people are supporting and putting forth at the state level and asking whether or not not even level playing field, but whether or not you're creating a situation where it is impossible for a minority business to compete with you. And until I think we have that conversation and figure out how to scale down some of the opportunities that exist for multi-state operators and really get a reaffirmation of commitment from lobbyists, lawmakers, advocates, and industry that, we need funding, we need opportunity.
Oh dear.
And
So,
somebody, there you go.
yeah, so I think those are, again, I appreciate support for social equity, but that has to manifest into state policies that are actually helping people function. And one of the challenges that we're seeing is medical cannabis. Medical cannabis industry is not diverse. And so when we are co-locating licenses, adult use licenses with medical operators, unless it is diverse, unless there are minimal amount of market share taken up, there are going to be challenges with people being able to compete with these giant businesses that have the economies of scale. So again, I think it's important for us to continue to look at what is working and not working, and for the industry kind of to recommit to a different kind of support, really actionable, broad policy support for minority businesses.
Okay, thank you, Amber. Joining us, even though he's a few minutes late, I guess he had a basketball game he had to get to with LeBron James and the rest of the group. But would y'all please welcome one of the top lobbyists in the country, Robert Raben. Robert, how are you? And welcome to the conversation. We're talking about challenges, choices, and opportunity in a billion-dollar industry.
Appreciate you, and I appreciate that you've got John Bailey under my name on the screen, which is a tremendous promotion. I'm gonna take a snapshot and not get rid of it. Thank you for letting me pop in and out. It was not LeBron, but I am doing something in the Senate today. I think the great news is who's on this screen, that in part because of the work that you've done, John, and Amber, and Steve Hawkins, and I'll get in trouble by calling out people, but we have more than critical mass of incredibly talented people of color who are pushing the industry inside, outside policy, corporate, et cetera, to recognize the incredible talent, the assets, and how to make the industry stronger when women and people of color are in leadership and financial leadership, not just sort of HR and philanthropic. So that's one. The other good news is, we've reached a tipping point in American culture and soon law. We're not there yet, obviously, where people recognize that the normalization and the regularization of this is appropriate. So once the man and the government get involved, all kinds of terrible things happen, but it will be better than what's going on with illicit markets, the incredible violence and harm to people of color by having this all be, Black and brown people on the front lines of drug wars and people in other countries and elsewhere getting rich. The challenge is going to be the man doesn't play, and power doesn't delegate itself, and so every step of the way, women and people of color are going to have to fight for participation. But that's an American story. It's a story we've seen in other industries. It's going to happen here. It's going to happen because such amazing talent as is on the screen is coming together, and we're going to do it. I think it's good news that New York and others are figuring out how to normalize, regularize, legalize. I know they're three different things with an equity lens. That's wonderful. It's only come about because there's a critical mass of people of color in decision-making authorities in those states. The devil is going to be in the detail and execution and holding them to the fire and making sure that we have quality people of color going for the licenses, doing the financing, being the general counsel, sitting on the boards. All of that is, you'll pardon the metaphor, hand-to-hand combat. But I'm increasingly confident that we're going to see great returns. So thank you for organizing us, John. Thank you for having this conversation and being the sort of the heart and the soul and the brains and the pancreas and the liver of what we're doing here.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate those comments. You know, we talked about the church, and we talk about social equity, we talk about economic development, and we talk about business development. And I think it would be important to add to this conversation Dr. Lance McCarthy, who's the CEO and founder of Global 1000, who is doing those types of things and has been doing those types of things around the country. And so when he tells his story and sort of the work he's been doing, I think it sheds a great deal of light on the social equity conversation relative to challenges, choices, and opportunity. Dr. Lance, will you join us and please share?
Yes, thank you, John, for allowing me to tell a couple of things this morning. Yes, economic development has been my career of choice, particularly in growing minority businesses with an emphasis in tech in urban areas. About 6 years ago, during the Ferguson unrest, we created Ferguson 1000 to create 1,000 jobs in Ferguson, and we expanded that all across the country. So we believe that the cannabis industry is opportune to have equity for minorities in the space. We're at two hats. One is a board advisor for M4MM. In that space, I assist Roz and her team in developing accelerators, doing cannabis economics, and looking at private capital. On the Global 1000 and the urban hip tech piece, we have set an agenda to help some of the most high profile ex-felons get into the cannabis industry. We believe those guys who made millions in the legal side should be able to come over to the legal side. So we have such people on our board of advisors, Harry O, who started Death Row Records, T out of BMF, and again, some of the major guys and girls who we're unfortunately in the legal side, but we're assisting them in creating businesses and partnerships through entrepreneurship training, through coding training, et cetera. You mentioned the faith-based arena. We know that the Black church is a major platform for urban development. We work with churches all across the country in helping them develop economic development plans. And again, we're partnering with M4MM in June to do an expungement service at the church so that we can help many individuals in the Los Angeles area begin to be viable and get back into the workforce. So we look at the cannabis industry as opportune. We know there's challenges, but we believe that addressing issues of equity capital, being able to help minority businesses grow, helping them grow through accelerators and things of that nature can only change the spectrum of where we're moving forward. So we're very happy to be a part of your team and your platform. We're here to bring as much research as we can and actual implementation to make it happen. But our goal is to assist, again, Black and Brown to not only get in the space, but own these companies and create jobs across the country. So we're here to help any way we can.
Thank you, Dr. McCarthy. Reverend Boyd, I'm gonna give you the last word, but I have a question. You know, last time you and I talked, you talked about it's important to take these brothers and sisters who have been doing what we call Black market work and to try to lift them up and give them the opportunity towards regulation rather than letting folks come in, the MSOs and others come in and just buy themselves into the process. In your perspective, what is your thoughts on how we take a Weedman or how we take some other folks and lift them up so that they can be considered just as important as some of the MSOs or some of the other startups in our state and in your state? And just a classic example, Cannabis Trade Federation, 37 licenses in New Jersey. Cannabis Trade Federation has a membership of 12 or 13. They will get access potentially to the first 12 or 13 licenses, even though social equity has been the driving force here. We're going to be letting organizations that have been doing business in New Jersey from a medical perspective be first in line from the adult legalization recreation perspective. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and this is one of the, so I want to kind of attach this to some of the discussion earlier, because I think it fits perfectly. Because I do want to go on record, as much as, I mean, I fight and I struggle massive injustice and white privilege in New Jersey. So when we do get a win, I want to make sure it's lifted up. New Jersey actually has the model when it comes to reparative justice and the tax revenue. New York followed us and ours is stronger. New Jersey has a social equity tax by weight, as well as 70% of the sales tax is supposed to come back to the impact zones. So New York's dollars are actually smaller than that. The percentages are smaller. And so if we're gonna do this nationally, I would just encourage folks, shoot for the stars. Don't start at 40%, start at a tax on the weight along with 70% of the sales tax. So just to start there. Secondly, back to this idea of abolition and reparations. And when we're looking at folks like New Jersey Weedman and folks who were in the underground market, if we learn from history, right, when slavery was abolished, you know, in the South, we all know the whole history around 40 acres and a mule. Justice was supposed to be that some folks got a parcel of land, right? They had already worked for free forever, and they were supposed to be just set up. What should be happening to folks who were already in the industry, right? And communities which had to face disproportionate enforcement around this, what equity and what justice would look like is New Jersey Weedman and others should not have to even pay to get in to the industry. They should be given the capital from the state funds and other folks, right? In other instances, in order for these larger white corporations to come in, they should be given equity stakes to folks who were in the underground market. Justice would look like making sure, justice looks like outrageously giving more opportunity to the people that were outrageously targeted. And just to say we're going to set aside 15% or we're going to do this and we're going to work on equity, that's not justice. It has to be intentional. It has to hurt the state. It has to be disproportionate. It has to be outweighed disproportionately towards those communities. Dollars have to come, right, as a result. And anybody with privilege who wants to get in has to make sure they're putting those dollars back into the folks who did not have dollars, because those big dollar players would not be able to be big dollar players if the folks in the underground market had not already created a market.
Thank you.
Just a note on that, like, not only intentional, but measurable. We have to measurement. I come from a healthcare background that says if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. We have to measure the intentionality and execution of these programs. And I just wanted to make sure I said something around banking. And I want to make sure we're clear on this. If we get a safe banking bill that comes through and it gets passed or what have you, it's not like tomorrow we're going to see this trickle down for Black-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses are going to have all this money flow through. It creates a funnel, it creates an opportunity, but do not have people thinking that if you see Safe Banking Act, the safe banking, if it passes, that means that we're automatically going to see this big case of money that's going to draw down, because we do know that banking has always been an issue for Black and brown businesses outside of cannabis. Cannabis ain't just the first issue with banking and access to capital. It's just one that's near and dear to our heart right now. But But I just want to make sure we set the room and set the expectation, because we have some people that believe that once that, if it does get brought into law, that they will automatically have options. They will automatically be seen as a viable candidate for funding, and that's not the case. And so that's my little 2 cents.
Okay, well, thank you, Roz. And we're going to move right to the social equity panel discussion, a Black community perspective. And our first speaker is Tahir Johnson, CEO of the Diversity Report, who is now working with the U.S. Cannabis Council. Tahir, did you join us as of yet? Okay, then I'm going to move right on to Suzanne Nicholson, CEO and founder of Iltal Gardens Herbal Apothecary. Suzanne, share with us your perspective on challenges, choices, and opportunity from a Black community perspective.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, John, and fellow cannabis leaders. My name is Suzanne Nicholson. I represent many companies, first being Iltal Gardens Herbal Apothecary. Iltal Gardens was a company that submitted in the RFP round of 2019 for medicinal license, along with other colleagues I see here on this call. In that, disproportionately, as discussed, cannabis has deeply impacted many in my family and in the surrounding community. Being Jamaican born, coming to this country, looking at opportunities of cannabis and realization of it being completely illegal, until recently in my home state of New Jersey, it was an awkward stumbling block. Capital, accessing it, being a woman of color, being taken seriously, not having business backing, meaning business sophistication, having the privilege and opportunity of being able to be in rooms where decisions were being made about an industry that has deeply impacted those of color. Additionally, understanding the process. It was a very clouded process. We had general information, but as a young business entrepreneur, didn't know a lot about business planning. Had a lot of consultants reach out early on wanting to take large sums of money. In that, working with good groups such as Pure Genesis, CEO Faye Coleman, and others, creating a network of Black thought and intentionality of making sure women like myself and others were sharing great information within our networks, which led to being able to submit a successful application. These platforms, these coalitions are not organic in this industry. More often, this industry is led by predominantly white males. And in that, we need to make sure there is more than intentionality and representation. It's also inclusive. Being those without capital, not having a voice, I think it's important regarding policy change. In New Jersey, we have a great opportunity of making sure that there is an opportunity for generational wealth for our people of color and those who have been disproportionately impacted. Let us not lose this opportunity by not collaborating collectively, because again, we have learned as a culture, by our collective organization, there comes great success.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Malcolm Evans, your thoughts on challenges, choices, and opportunity in the cannabis industry.
Hi, good afternoon, John. Good afternoon, panel. Yeah, so, you know, challenges, choices in the cannabis industry. I think, you know, as chair of the Colorado Black Chamber of Commerce, you know, we see challenges in this industry being a little higher, obviously, than you know, members that are represent other industries in our world, right? I mean, because you know, we're just becoming acceptable again as a community of cannabis and all of the you know, the ancillary business that goes around that industry. So just to get that you know, idea that, hey, this is legal. Recreational cannabis is legal here in Colorado, and it's becoming at least decriminalized in pretty much every other state. And so, first of all, just being able to get that out there to our members. The second thing I think is getting them to understand that, yeah, if you're going to transfer into a legal business entity and you're not going to, obviously be selling this on the black market, what comes with that is you've got to establish, a business. You got to establish business connections, business ties, relationships, right? And so I think that's another challenge that we have to get those, businesses that, hopefully, again, the city council here in Denver, passes this, takes this next step, and Mayor Hancock can sign the, bill that allows transportation of marijuana, to the various, entities here. And so again, you got to have those businesses ready to take advantage of it. I mean, if you look at the Denver Business Journal, it was an article on Friday that said, hey, if you have, A, B, and C, you can be an applicant. Well, you can be an applicant, but to actually get a contract is a second thing, right? And so I just encourage those individuals that are interested in taking advantage of some of this social equity that Denver is putting in place to reach out to the chamber, join the chambers for as little as $300 a year, make connections. Tremaine Bradley, who is the executive director of marijuana, the marijuana industry group, joined the chamber here just a month ago. He's reaching out to the chamber. He wants to reach out to chamber members, make connections. I've mentioned this on several calls in the past, but we have a partnership with DU, a building success program where for as little as $600, you can take 6 classes on weekends. You can get some, depth in accounting, contract review, marketing. And again, you gotta be running a business. So you're gonna, need to know all the things that go into running that business. So again, I encourage those that are interested in, getting into this business to, think about, not just, hey, I'm going to be able to, transfer marijuana and it's going to be legal. It's like, no, you're going to be establishing a business. You're going to have to get a license and permitting and insurance and all of that comes with running a business.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Faye Coleman, they talked about hemp. They talked about what's going on from a Black community perspective. You oftentimes, you say, John, I don't want to talk about cannabis. I mean, I love to talk about it, but I want to talk about the Black community and hemp. So go, Faye, go.
Well, we got a whole half hour set aside this afternoon to talk about hemp and join the Hot Topics room, and I look forward to everybody doing that. But I first want to thank you, John, and Roz McCarthy for the opportunity to connect with everybody today. And I also want to thank your wife, Dr. Bailey, for her timely insights. My company is Pure Genesis. We are in pursuit of a cannabis license. We are multi-state hemp operators, cannabis educators, consultants, and CBD beverage owners. As a certified MWBE cannabis business, we continue to expand our positive reach by fulfilling our mission of education, access, and advocacy, in large part through our service through the boards of the NJCBA, the African American Chamber of Commerce, the National Hemp Association, and Minorities for Medical Marijuana. So now, we've all talked a great deal about social equity. For me, diversity provides a seat at the table, inclusion is integration, where equity is access. That said, I have to say, the stain on the cannabis industry is the lack of intentional investment in BIPOC businesses who are eager, ready, and prepared to enter this industry. We have to look at legislation, but look beyond legislation to those who have the capacity to invest and support. And for that to happen, it takes decision to do more now. For those national cannabis companies who have licenses, why not sponsor a BIPOC business in support of acquiring a license? These are some of the things we need to focus on. The private sector and industry organizations can support those who are focusing on elevating our community colleges and our HBCUs. For legislators, it is their #1 job to be socially equitable. Social equity applies to frameworks and processes. It is not an outcome. Social equity is a machine. Total equity, or we say health equity, is absolutely the machine's output. Now, here are some facts I think that matter with regards to Black women. It is of note that today, America's Black women hold more than 90% less wealth than American white men. as reported by Goldman Sachs. Now, we know that Black women have the power to transform communities. And if we understand the impact of Stacey Abrams, even a country, the bottom line is, if we can make our economy work for Black women, we all benefit. It is also interesting to note that Black women represent 42% of new women-owned businesses, yet Black women own a mere 1% of cannabis businesses. In large part, again, due to lack of access to capital, which dictates in part to which industries Black women flock. If you don't have personal resources to get your business up and running, you may pick businesses that are easy to get off the ground, but they are crowded with competition for similar products and services and less opportunity for differentiation. So one might say the ability to go for a cultivation license versus the need to go for a micro license is in large part due to the lack of resource investment and capital challenges. So as we look at equity today, it's really not helping Black women get ahead. At the end of the day, it is about positioning us and preparing us to thrive by investing in acumen and resources per our outcomes. And it's about being a priority. Black women-owned businesses grew by 50% from 2014 to 2019, representing the highest growth rate of any female demographic during that time. So it is clear that this is high margin innovation and value creation, which is the value proposition for investing in the Black woman inclusively and multi-generationally. So we don't just need policy, we need impact partners who can make this a priority. So where do we begin? In addition to legislators truly legislating with the social equity framework and the private sector helping minorities and women-owned businesses launch sustainably, we must next create a pipeline of talent through our youth. As PG's mission is education, we have joined CHEM, the Cannabis Health Equity Movement, to become a part of a coalition, which is a consortium of BIPOC innovators in the cannabis industry, which simply means we're combining forces to cultivate the next generation of cannabis leaders and transform communities devastated by the war on drugs. We absolutely believe this can work by partnering with local municipality leaders, but more important, our HBCUs and community colleges right here in New Jersey that primarily serve our communities. The aim of CHEM Global Campuses is to revitalize underperforming Black communities by restoring underutilized land, reinvesting in small businesses and workforce development, and establishing the educational pipeline to success in this rapidly growing business that we are so eager to participate in. So in closing, this message is for Black women entrepreneurs. As a strong Black woman, what words have you heard used to describe you? Aggressive, irritated, mean, defensive, loud, angry. But we are more than that. We are smart, we are capable, we are kind, loving, strong, defenders, dedicated, loyal. We are the ties that bind our communities and we give life to our communities. We are movers and shakers, and after 2020, can't we all see that the Black woman is a difference maker? So always remember that our voices that we hold individually and collectively matter. So find your purpose and pursue it passionately, persistently, and loudly, and win. I will leave with my favorite quote from Dr. K. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? I ask that of all of us here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Reverend Coleman. We appreciate the speech. And now I'm going to ask our good friend, Adolphus Pruitt, president of St. Louis NAACP. Adolphus, your thoughts on challenges, choices, and opportunity in this billion-dollar industry?
You know, I guess, let me approach it from just one different perspective, and that is that it is ironic that here we have emerging industry that we all know beyond a shadow of a doubt deserve as much equity as any other industry in this country. But at the same time, we have not been able to address one of the greatest impediments for African Americans to participate in any industry, let alone the cannabis industry, and that is the issue of access to capital. Access to capital, in some cases, access to patient capital. You know, all across the country, you know, states are legalizing cannabis in ways and at speeds we never thought was possible. And in doing that, they are setting a bar, in most cases financially, that is so high that even those who have been socially disenfranchised from over the years across the board are still in many ways being locked out, redlined, or for lack of a better, handcuffed from being a part of the industry. We have to find ways for this issue of access to capital. And I know a lot of folks are going to talk about, when we talk about that is banking and SBA and all the other things, and say that because of the federal laws and the rules which prevent the historical financial institutions from participating in the industry. But at the federal level, when they have discussions about making those changes, about decriminalizing cannabis, and about making sure that the financial sector can participate, none of those discussions include dealing with the access to capital issue that financial sector has failed to meet across the board, whether it's buying a house, buying a car, or whatever you want to call it, opening up a business, period. And so that's the one big issue that, I'm starting to focus on more than anything else, and that is access to capital. And especially at the federal level, is that if they're going to introduce federal legislation and open up cannabis and open up cannabis for the financial sector to participate in and service, then they also need to make sure that we include some access, some pressure points, some benchmarks within the legislation that really deals with the access to capital issue that most African Americans and others are faced when it comes to trying to start a business. I struggle every year when I read and hear about another state, and in my home state here in Missouri. We're dealing with the social equity issue now. We're trying to go recreational, and we're dealing with addressing the issues or those impediments that we feel are keeping minorities out of the business. But even after we address them, even after all of that passes, the question still comes is, how are the people who have been disenfranchised by cannabis laws, how are the people who have been locked out of business opportunities, period, where are they going to get the capital for the entry point? And even more, once we get them in the industry, where are they going to get the working capital to grow their business, to grow their business model, to take advantage of the marketplace, to compete against the folks who have deep pockets and who are able to attract investment capital, private capital, who are able to attract that. And let's be clear, the venture capitalists who are looking at the emerging market as relates to cannabis across this country, and they're looking at all of the states legalizing it and making recreational, they are still not looking at how they're going to help those who've been socially disenfranchised. They're not looking to lend us money either. And so that's my take. I mean, I stayed in one focus area, but this area that I think is extremely important.
That's a good point, Brother Pruitt. And just so that you know, at 2:45 today, or 4:45, or 3:45 in Missouri, Gerald Register with Curio, Tavares King with CEO, and Chris Weber from the Weber Wild Fund are going to be on the call talking about access to capital. So we have addressed your issue to some degree, not fully, but we have addressed it to some degree, and we're going to make sure that question is asked. My last speaker here is one of my young boys. I'm gonna reach out and claim because he's doing unbelievable work in the industry, and we've developed an unbelievable relationship. He and I and Ernest and August and several others. But I want to introduce you to Tahir Johnson, who is now the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the United States Cannabis Council. Even though you're running a few minutes late, talk to us a little bit about what you're going to be doing for Stephen Hawkins in that area. And just want to acknowledge the good work you've been doing all along with the Cannabis Report and over at the Cannabis Industry Association.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Well, I definitely appreciate the time and definitely appreciate you always giving me a platform.
Pardon my parakeets in the background going crazy for anyone listening. But I'm actually super excited to be here and super excited about my new position to work with Stephen in the U.S. Cannabis Council, as well as with the Marijuana Policy Project. And my goal in my new role is to continue the work that I've been doing, especially now having the opportunity to represent such great and strong companies that we have as members, to continue to be able to bridge the gap between the social equity community and also the cannabis businesses that want to be able to do right, but also to make sure that as we pursue federal legalization, that we make sure that social equity is at the top of the conversation. Also, those same people from our communities have the opportunity to give their input as we are drafting this legislation, to make sure that we have policies that are good for us, as well as being able to try to, again, make sure that we can impact our communities with education, training, resources, and programming to be able to go back. Just like Adolphus said before me, I think is one of the things that's critical is that our people have the actual tools and resources to be able to be successful in the industry. And my role is to continue to do that work as I've been doing since I came in the industry, continuing what's been done at NCIA, and now also having the opportunity to hopefully do it bigger and better here at USCC.
Well, we appreciate that, young brother, and good luck with what you're doing there, and anything any of us that can do, Roz, myself, and others, to help you and Stephen Hawkins, we're going to do.
Well, thank you. I definitely know I appreciate always having you all as resources, and I'll definitely be reaching out.
I'm not sure if my friend Ed DeVoe, Ed, have you joined us yet on the call? Okay, you know me, I'm gonna move right towards Paula Sardinas, a woman to watch in the industry. Paula, tell us a little bit about one, what you're doing up in Washington State, but also your thoughts from a cannabis industry leader's perspective on challenges, choices, and opportunity.
Thank you, John. And I'm first going to say, as we tackle the issues of equality and equity, digital inequity is keeping me from streaming video. But we have been working on this issue in Washington in different phases for many, many years. So in 2018, we realized that there was financial inequity, and we passed Senate Bill 5928, which basically allowed us to be able to make sure that if you were in the cannabis industry, you would be able to bank those funds and have access to banking. And some of our credit unions here, you're also able to have access to some loan products as we've dealt with the Cole Memorandum and some of those things on the federal level and worked on the MORE Act on a federal level. Some of the challenges that we're seeing is everything you guys have talked about this morning. We don't know the difference between equity and equality. And when you look at Washington State, not only were we left out of the cannabis industry, but we continue to be an afterthought. So last year we passed our Cannabis Social Equity Bill, which basically was designed for the next 8 years to give centering anti-Black racism, African Americans, and communities of color that foot up. But what we've seen as we've been doing this work is that the legislation was woefully inadequate. And so as we've fought here to try to get some equity through our task force, which I coach here, we've seen the same things that you guys are seeing throughout the country. We've seen the existing retailers in the industry spend millions of dollars on their lobbyists to fight our progress. We've seen a legislature here that is democratically controlled, basically sit on their hands and do nothing and be idle. We've not seen the investments in ancillary businesses, even though last year our cannabis industry during COVID-19 produced $1 billion more than the year before. So I want you to think about what I'm saying. A disease that is killing Black folks with a disparate impact allowed cannabis to be essential in our state, where we are less than 1% Black owned in the cannabis industry, generated an additional $1 billion in revenue, and we are fighting like this is 1963 in a Democrat-controlled state to get access to those dollars in equity. We did an update bill, which is 1443, and I put it in the chat box for you guys, which basically means that I did that bill to invite not just in-state resources, because we're only 4.5% of the state, but those of you who are out of state who have cannabis expertise to come join us in Washington. And we did the one thing that we never talk about. Black folks don't create inequity. We did not create structural racism. So what we need to have are people with that expertise doing the work, but we need to compensate those people. So in my bill, I created a technical assistance grant that would allow us to pay those people with expertise to help us achieve real equity in our programs, whether it is mentoring people in the cannabis business and ancillary businesses, or just bringing on some of your other expertise to help Black folks here in a way that we don't have in a state like New Jersey or Massachusetts that have a much larger Black population and demographic. And so what I'm seeing is just a lot of lip service, not enough action, not enough commitment to the action. And I'd like to join myself to Sister Faye Coleman. And when Black women are standing up and advocating, because we toted this country from Harriet Tubman to 2020 on our back, we rid this country of Donald Trump. We're being called angry. We're being called nasty. We're being called the B word. Last week, someone attempted to slap my hand from the governor's office, and I slapped right back because I dared to advocate for Black people to have a good bill, their rightful place. And I dared to call out TK Bentler, a white lobbyist that was trying to keep Seattle white-owned in cannabis. We have to unite on a local and national level and say, we're not going to accept these watered-down equity programs. We're not going to accept diversity, equity, and inclusion in name only. We're not going to accept an industry where you all had all of the money and resources and access to capital. And in my state, you've had an 8-year advantage and you have done nothing to help Black and brown and queer folks to catch up. And now you think you can toss us 37 licenses and we're going to say, thank you. We're going to say that's woefully inadequate and you can do better. And we're going to keep our foot on the gas and we're going to point out to you, we're not going to accept crumbs from the table. When you don't give us a seat at the table, we're going to build our own. And we're going to invite the resources from all around the country and unite Black and build our own. So Washington probably has one of the best landscapes for achieving real equity, real diversity, and real inclusion. If you want to be in, call me, get involved here. Let's unite. There are billions and billions and billions of dollars. I also put in the link to show you where our money is going here. It's going to general revenue at 33%. It's going 53 or 54% to healthcare, yet we still have the worst health outcomes, the worst schools. So we need to push back and say, well, what does that cannabis marijuana dollar fund do? And why are those dollars not paying for affordable housing in areas that have gentrification? Why is it not paying for training and trades programs for young men and women coming out of prison? Why is it not paying for advocacy programs with our Black-led nonprofits, NGOs, and women-owned businesses? Why are you talking about funding that, doing lip service, but then there's no trackable, measurable KPIs that show you where the work is being done? So again, if you are an industry leader, if you have cannabis experience, when the governor signs that bill, we're going to put in a link so you can apply here for that technical assistance grant. I think we've capped it at about $150,000 to pay Black men and women for their work. I want you to reach out to me and come help us do this work in Washington, because we believe we can be the model for the country, but we have to get it right.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Paula. And believe it or not, as Roz and I talk offline, we've talked about every state in the union, and we're going to be helping all of you do the work that needs to be done, because we think we have a voice and we want to be able to help your voices in that environment. Our next speaker is Ron Holmes, CEO of the Minority Group from Illinois. And Ron is doing some unbelievable work there. And somebody put on the chat, what about Illinois? Well, here's Illinois right now. Challenges, choices, and opportunities coming out of Illinois in the cannabis industry.
Hey, John, it's always good to see you. And hey, everybody, how's it going? My name's Ron Holmes. I wear two hats. So the first is as a lobbyist for the cannabis industry here. The second is as a co-founder of the Majority Minority Group, which has helped dozens and dozens and dozens of Black and brown folks apply for licensure here in Illinois. Let me just start by highlighting some of the things that are going well and then talk about some of the challenges that we're having in Illinois. So the good thing is, last year we sold about $1 billion in cannabis. We also were able to hand back 25% of cannabis revenues to communities that were most impacted by the war on drugs, another 25% to mental health services. And we were able to expunge some records. Now, a lot of those were done in Cook County, which is basically the county where Chicago is housed. We're still struggling to kind of get those expungements done on a statewide basis. But the other thing that I would note is that we had a licensure process that occurred almost a year ago. And we have struggled to get out licenses. We know that the policy works. There is no shortage of Black and brown folks that apply for licensure here in Illinois who are basically just waiting. They're on standby as the state has struggled with implementation. Everything from decisions made in the scoring process to how vendors were chosen. So, what I would say, is that a lot of folks at this point are talking about how, their cannabis law should look like in each state. And I think that's a very valid conversation to have. But one thing that we did not focus enough on here in Illinois was what implementation would look like. I think that a lot of folks kind of took a victory lap once we passed the bill. I mean, there's obviously really good tenets in our bill that have been adopted in some of the other states that have passed their legislation. But the reality is that implementation is far more important than legislative intent. I mean, you can spell things out to a T, but if an administration isn't diligent about making sure those things are fulfilled, you end up where we are now. And that's with people on the outside looking in after cannabis is now lapped alcohol sales in Illinois. So here's what I hope happens moving forward. One, I think that folks have to, specifically like advocates and those that apply for applications, have to get on the same page about what's good for everybody in the Black and brown community versus individual applicants. Two, I think that folks have to also begin to make sure that we all socialize what a win looks like. And I've got different opinions on that. I don't think that it's a couple of people holding a lot of licenses. I think the win looks like a whole bunch of people that have opportunities to stand up their businesses. And then three, we've got to make sure that, as we are growing our industry, that we're not leaving folks behind that could fulfill ancillary roles. So, it's really easy to kind of carve out an industry that has, a few licensees and, obviously those supply chains mean they do everything in-house. We need to build industries that allow people that have ancillary businesses to participate with multiple firms. So, John, that's kind of, what's going on in Illinois. Folks are going to continue to make money here in Illinois. We're not quite, Colorado in terms of our adaptation process, but we have to get new licensees in here. And it's something that I know that not only the applicants want badly, but I think, quite frankly, cultivators that don't have outlets want the same thing. So those are my thoughts.
Real quick before you go.
What's up, John?
Can you comment on the governor's expungement of 11,000 people on January 1?
Yeah, I mean, I think those announcements are great, but the truth is that, the expungement piece we always knew was going to happen, right? We knew the expungements were going to happen. We knew that money was going to go back to communities that were impacted by the war on drugs, but we want all three legs of the stool done, right? It's important that licensure is done as well. The expungement stuff is great, but predominantly it's only being done in Cook County, where we have a Democratic state's attorney, where there are Republican clerks in downstate Illinois. Like that work is not being done. So we also have to go back to the table to figure out how we can make expungement simpler for those who need it. And I heard a lot about the expungement talks earlier. I mean, I know that clean slate is something that we're considering here in Illinois to go a step further to simplify the process. I think that, we make things so complicated sometimes in terms of leveling the playing field instead of just saying like, it is what it is. And we've got to, really get better about doing that.
One of the things that Roz and I have been talking about is the accountability report card. What we've learned from other industries, be it paper, beverage, to hotel, is that no one willingly gives up their resources. So either they're going to have to be pulled, cajoled, pushed, convinced, and I'm a firm believer that you don't have to wait on legislation. There's a symbolic right thing to do in the industry. And so I want to use a report card as a way of sharing with folks that from a board, from C-suites, from ancillary businesses, so investment in Black media to investment in the Black community, we have to hold you accountable because that's what we found out in other industries. Any thoughts about that for Illinois?
Yeah, the good thing, again, that's in the bill that, again, we've struggled with implementation on is that, we always built in a disparity study in terms of what happens after each round of licensing to allow our chief cannabis officer to make policy recommendations. The second thing is, as part of your licensure here in Illinois, you also have to include not only your diversity study, but also your community giving. So that should tell folks exactly how folks are doing in terms of these things, like, pain points that you've mentioned, John. And quite frankly, I think the other reality is advocates have a key advantage, and that's that current industry members are trying to apply for licensure in other states, which means that if you're coming to me for the first time as a cannabis firm, don't tell me what you're doing about social equity. Show me what you've done in other states, right? And John, I think that's just like the brilliance of your report card, man, is because, we can't legislate good behavior, right? We can have people, like we do it here in Illinois, pay $100,000 to, incubate firms and pay to community colleges and all that kind of stuff. But the true moral fabric of a company isn't anything that's ever going to be legislated. It's just going to be things that people voluntarily decide to do. And that's how we, grow this industry in the way that we should.
Okay. Mike Lamuto, who is a committee organizer for the National Cannabis Industry Association and their DEA committee. Mike, you've heard some of the conversation. What is National Cannabis Industry Association doing relative to social equity? And congratulations on your new job replacing Tahir as their diversity and inclusion person. And so tell us from your perspective about the challenges, choices, and opportunities that you see from your job.
Yeah, so thanks, John. Thanks for including me in this conversation today. It's good to see you, Ron. I'm starting the position tomorrow, taking the reins from the position that Tahir Johnson had vacated. And Tahir did a great job of really helping the NCIA get a lot of its diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives started and kind of off the ground, including a social equity scholarship program. I think we have about 120 members or so in that program, but that really is just the beginning, and we know that. 2 years ago, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee started operating. And so we've spent the first year really figuring out who we were. And this last year, it's been really starting to move forward and implement and try to provide as much value as we can to the social equity members. We're looking at that more than anything else. The way I see it is it's an incubator of sorts. It's an incubator of a program, in the sense, not an incubator of like a business incubator, but we're incubating a social equity program, so to speak, within NCIA, trying to figure out how do we create something of value that isn't just, virtue signaling, something that isn't just, on paper. And in order to do that, one of the things I'm going to be really focusing on over these next couple of months as I get into the position is to really do a lot of outreach and figure out, what resources are available. So, I mean, like this report card that you're talking about, I mean, that I think is going to be something really important for us to be championing from within NCIA. It's something that our committee has talked about, but if you've done that heavy lifting, it's like, hey, let's go ahead and figure out how to put that into play. And another part of what I'm going to be doing is reaching out to the different organizations. I know NCIA has a lot of, Tahir really set up a lot of great connections and a lot of great connections with other organizations around the country. So now it's my job to really make sure, how do we make this again so it's not just on paper? Because the thing that I'm seeing and that I think a lot of people within our industry are seeing, and was mentioned on this call today even, is that a lot of what's being done in social equity is just that, it's just on paper. And we need to really figure out, how do we connect with the social equity applicants themselves in a meaningful manner and provide and bring the resources that we have access to. NCIA has access to a lot of resources. A lot of it is just simply the network itself. But there's also a lot of great educational content, and a lot of different members offer things to social equity applicants that a lot of social equity applicants don't even realize are being offered. So we need to pull that together into a database, pull it together into a more structured community, so to speak, so we can then figure out what do we offer these social equity members that really helps provide them a serious boost to their business and being able to succeed in this space. Once we get that figured out and tightened up, then the goal at NCIA is to really push that out to, beyond just the 120 members we have right now, but to do it in a sustainable and scalable manner. And I think to Ron's point, beyond just social equity operators, it's also social equity ancillaries, because I think that that's where, I don't know the numbers, but like 80 or 90% of the money that's in the industry isn't in operators, it's in ancillaries. And so we need to figure out how to support social equity applicants so that regardless of whether they win licenses or even if they're not even going for them, we still can be providing them with support. And it's not just some flagship of, oh, hey, this is a guy that won a license and we're going to go out and support them, but actually like the whole community is benefiting from this whole structure. So in a nutshell, that's what we're working on, and that's what I'll be tasked with in these next few months. As you guys probably know, Tahir Johnson's shoes are not easy shoes to fill. So I'm just going to do what I can from my perspective. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael, and we'll appreciate those comments. Eric Foster, National Director of Policy for Minorities to Medical Marijuana. Do you have some thoughts on challenges, choices, and opportunity in the cannabis industry? Eric?
Yes, I do. If you can give me, actually, can you do me a favor? Because I just popped in and I do apologize. I know Roz added me to this. I missed the
What do you need us to
invite. Can you come right back to me?
Yeah, we'll come back to you, but you're next up. So what
Okay.
we'll do is we'll go to somebody who's not in the industry, but who missed the Black community perspective, and that is Chet Sis. Chet, are you with us?
I
Thank you.
am. Let me.
And I thought this would be good for us because while he's not an industry person, he's a Black community person. And I was asking him to talk about a Black community perspective, and he's a futurist. And so we've heard from Black historians, but I'm not sure if we heard from Black futurists. So Chet, give us a perspective on challenges, choices, and opportunities, brief perspective, if you would, from a cannabis perspective, based on what you know about what you know and what you've seen in the work that you've been doing as a Black futurist.
Absolutely. Let me just say that the cannabis industry is actually kind of in the same place where the green economy is also emerging. There are two areas of opportunity that are emerging at the same time, and they both have a lot of energy behind them. Again, the green economy being that there's a lot of money being poured into it. And as a matter of fact, not only just national money, but there's international money going into the whole idea of how do we make sure that we save the future. The cannabis industry has the same kind of energy, the same kind of money influence that's coming into it. The challenge that we face, of course, as are all industry inside of our society, and that is that big players come in, they're well researched, they're well resourced, and they have a lot of strength, so they can kind of stranglehold the industry as we've been talking about. The challenge that we face all the way down the line is it's more than just about equity. It is about how do we want to position ourselves inside of society in relationship to the cannabis industry? Because my suspicion is that the big guys and the well-resourced and well-financed people will come in, and we'll be talking about inclusion years from now. And I always say that anytime you get to the place where you start to talk about inclusion, you've already failed. That means you're trying to fix it from what did not take place before. So I think what's going to have to happen is that there has to be some level of yes. Yes.
Something in the background, we can get.
Oh, yes.
Tell your people to be quiet.
Yeah, just 1 second. Tawani.
But I think just to know.
I'm sorry, we have two different meetings going at the same time, so it's a little hard.
Okay, go ahead.
So the challenge that we face is that I wonder about our efforts in equity, and this is going to rub some people the wrong way. I don't mean to say it this way, but my belief is that in order for industries to really do well, we're going to have to create ways of doing it alone. And I say that only because we have a really clear track record of how equity efforts have gone over the years inside of the various industries that exist. And so my hope is that, sorry.
Exactly.
My hope is that we can find a way to create an independent level as opposed to some of the other industries that exist, because the track record, the record is strewn with all of these opportunities that we've had of inclusion, and they just haven't worked out very well. So that's from a futurist perspective. What I'm seeing is that we have to create some entities that exist in and of themselves, as opposed to seeking to be included inside of that industry. That does not mean that we don't partner, but it does mean that we partner from a position of strength as opposed to hoping that they'll come around and do the right thing. And that's not just with the cannabis industry, that's also with the growing green economy. There are some things that can increase our partnerships, and that includes being able to kind of build partnerships across the platform, also to make our position visually highly visible so that partners can find us, and just to be able to create a kind of a private equity firm or a private equity platform that allows us to be able to fund ourselves. I'm not sure if we're thinking along those lines, but every time I look at the path that has led us to this particular point, what I see is that the industry resourced people will usually end up controlling even our best desires, so we don't really get where we want to go.
Well, I don't want to shut you off, but you got two conversations going on, and it's I don't want you to throw a pin.
Yeah, no, my apologies for that. It's just
straight to Eric Foster from Minorities for Medical Marijuana. He's policy director. Eric, your thoughts? And Chet, you want to put your mute back on?
Yeah, I'll put it back on.
All right, Eric.
Thank you. And like I said, I do sincerely apologize for the
That's okay, Eric.
delay on my end.
Don't worry about it. Roz has already done the apology for you. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. Not a problem. So where we sit right now is a few things. First off, we have to understand that, and I liken the industry to my sons in terms of the age of where they were at. The overall commercial marijuana and hemp industry is basically a 22-month-old. It's walking around, it's talking, it's got some understanding of itself, but it's not anywhere near even teenagehood, less known getting into elementary school. And I relay that as an analogy based on the fact that there's still, even with the fact that we've had significant delays of bringing in social equity, economic inclusion, supplier diversity, workforce and career mobility for people of color, and community investment, there's still a significant amount of time if we take the next 2 years of intentional activities at a state-by-state level to bring forth those specific policies. One of the things I've learned as a lobbyist over the years is that no one on the legislative side, the elected officials, executive branch, legislative branch, or even administrative, they're not the ones that are really going to get into the details and write the detailed policies for you. We have to be the ones to bring those policies to bear. That's one of the things that I do personally with the company I work at Banks & Company, but then separately now with this opportunity with Minorities for Medical Marijuana, is looking at how do we craft and then take state by state those specific detailed policies that can get us the opportunities that we're looking for, be it when it comes to the way licensing is structured, when it comes to increasing share of minority owner operator licensees, when it comes to economic inclusion and expansion, employment and professional mobility, improving health outcomes, supply diversity and revenue, and social justice impacts. We have to be detailed to be able to not only do it at the state level, but then also within the states that have local zoning and preferencing and licensing components like Michigan, Colorado, Alaska, and other places, having that sensibility built in at the local level so that there's companion local policies that also add to the goals and the outcomes. It's actually something we've done here in Michigan with a number of local communities like Grand Rapids and Muskegon Heights and Detroit and other communities. Well, I'll take Detroit back because we did work with them in the past, not where they're at right now. But in terms of putting those intentional programming components in their ordinance level. Now at a federal level, we're still going to be, and I hate to be the cold water on the fire, but we're still years away from federal legalization just because of the way that the Senate rules are structured and comprised of. And if you want to have another class that we can walk through those dynamics and possible strategies to work through the cloture, filibuster, budget reconciliation, and how we could possibly tie some stuff to a budget reconciliation bill, we could do that. But there are some things that we can work on trying to get addressed at a federal level that can at least provide some sort of relief on the short term. So one of the things that we could take a look at is getting changes to the 280E rule at a federal level in terms of taxes and liabilities and write-offs to at least increase the amount of write-off opportunities for non-production related and manufacturing related licensees, as well as at the state level, because certain states, Michigan, Arkansas, Arizona, Massachusetts, have done it at the state level so that there's relief on state tax returns for licensed businesses, because that's going to help businesses of color. Also, getting regulatory support for paperwork processing and cost of regulatory compliance to minority deposit institutions, the 146 Black, Latino, Asian, Native American owned banks around the country, and the 500 plus credit unions that are also owned by the same ethnicity groups, so that there can be a preferencing of banking support that those entities can give to commercial licensed marijuana businesses, but then also pushing the hemp sector as well to these banks also and credit unions. And then also removing any sort of restrictive activity that embargoes the ability to use the depository assets for the banks that do. And there's roughly 650 banks and credit unions around the country. Some are FDIC, some are state charter, but that do business with licensed marijuana businesses. But they are restricted from using those deposits in the normal course of their external lending portfolio assets and in their intrabank lending assets and notes for trading and creating additional products. Remove any of those restrictions as long as they're following the FinCEN 2014 guidelines for compliance and the 2015 Federal Reserve guidelines for compliance on reporting and communication about these businesses that are banking with them, because then that becomes an incentive for the banks to now be able to leverage those assets as they do with other deposits to create more products for the community. So I think if we take stock of where we are, we use this year to be aggressive at going state by state to ensure that we're pushing policies that get to those specific intentional outcomes that I mentioned earlier, coupled with at the federal level, getting regulatory changes that can be done through the Department of Treasury, through the Federal Reserve, and through the IRS that don't need statutory change. While we try to work on how do you tie in safe banking or the Morris Act to a reconciliation budget bill, it's doable. It's going to be difficult, but it's doable. I don't know if we'll be able to do it this go round, but we've got time. We can get to more outcomes and more wins for ourselves in both the medical commercial sector, the recreational adult use commercial sector, and the hemp sector. So that's why I'm glad to be a part of the team and part of the M4MM, because I've been over the past week deep in research on each state's laws that exist and their administrative rules to figure out what needs to be modified, improved upon, and what can be best standard practices that we could take state by state to add on to some states or to introduce if they've never had it before to get us to those outcomes. So that's where we have challenges. So my grandmother's, both of them, used to always tell me, any challenge is an opportunity for success if you embrace the playing field that you're working with. And that's what we try to do and what I try to do in this role.
You know, I appreciate that, Eric, because as we hear folks on the call throughout the day, and we've been talking about the challenges, you know what I mean? And, you know, there could be historical challenges, there could be current state by state challenges. And then we talk about the choices. The choices are going to be impacted by historically what we know about what we know, and what we can do about the current situation. But what I'd be interested in hearing from you, based on the research that you've done with these other states, what do you see as being, I mean, better yet, is there a consistent comparison between what veteran states, or states who've been legal for several years, as opposed to those states who were just passed? What is it from your perspective is a best practice message that you could send between the two states?
So right now, and that's a great question. One, there isn't consistency. Got 38 states and DC with the medical side. We've got 18 with commercial, recreational. Even with those with medical, we've got some that are real limited in how they operate and function. So there's nothing consistent, but there are pieces that I'm pulling out to try to create something that can be a best practice model that we could take to both the mature states and the newly adopted states. Because even with the mature states, and I come from the corporate sector, I worked in supplier diversity as with the Bartek Group, which is the largest Black-owned human resource solutions company in the country. And I worked heavily with the supplier diversity people in the automotive, telecom, healthcare, and those sectors. When we compare that and those other industry sectors to this industry, even with those longer, more mature states, they're really just a 2.5-year-old in terms of their maturity to the lifespan versus those other industries which are in midlife crisis. So that's why I say there's still opportunities to make improvements within the Californias, Colorados, Oregons, and Washingtons, and then separately in the new adopting states like Mississippi, the Dakotas, and other places, and tie in and leverage, in another instance, our indigenous tribal nations as a part of some of the solutions as it relates to land access, because that is a big challenge for Black and Brown operators. But as we're seeing here in Michigan, a number of the tribal nations have land that they own in other communities, other municipalities, that allow them to make zoning decisions and licensing decisions for those in those communities where maybe the municipality is against it, but it's their land, their sovereign area. So they can create some more opportunities. So there's some, I guess the best way of saying it, unfortunately, there's not one easy standard that exists, but that's okay. We're gonna make standards and then we're gonna take it state by state.
Okay, I appreciate those comments, and thank you so much, Eric. You know, Roz, this is a good one, Roz. This is a bright young brother. He knows his stuff, and even though he came on late, he didn't come on wrong. And so I appreciate that.
Listen, I used to be a jack of all trades trying to run everything, and then I was so fortunate to connect with Eric, and we got something special that we're going to try to put together that's open source for everybody in the cannabis. We want to make sure there's no excuse when it comes to policy in regards to where our direction is and where the options are and what some of the good policy are that's happening, and even some of the bad policy. So just stay tuned.
Okay, I would appreciate that. And so now we're going to move towards our social equity panel discussion, federal, state, and municipal elected officials perspective. And so we've asked Kwanzaa Hall, who's a U.S. Congressman from Atlanta, Georgia, Leslie Arad, who's a Colorado State Senator, Colorado State Representative, the Honorable Jamal Holly, who's a New Jersey Assemblyman, the Honorable Shanali Herring, Virginia Delegate and Majority Leader, and the Honorable Sam Frisbee, Chair of New Jersey Mercer County Commission. And so we'll start off by going straight to our good friend, the Congressman. Congressman Hall, talk to us a little bit about what's going on. Well, we know there's a lot happening in Georgia. And we know that you and your senator and Stacey and all of them are making a big deal about fairness and doing the right thing. Share with us your perspective on the challenges, choices, and opportunity from a political frame of reference in this $20 billion industry. And welcome. Good to see you, good brother.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. This is a very worthy initiative. Thank you, Roz and team at the Black Cannabis Equity Initiative. This is phenomenal to see us coming together like we should. I think we have a very unique moment in history right now to reset a lot of things. The cannabis industry is one where we have a chance to begin a true restorative financial justice strategy, looking at how we get equity really distributed throughout the country to those who've been impacted most. Now, the South is a very different place in that it's generally been in a move towards medical more so than recreational. And I think that will probably remain the trend as the South is right now under Republican leadership. From a business standpoint, there are some benefits overall to the collective for it to remain medical, in my opinion. But I think leadership does matter. You know, we had Democrats for a long time and they didn't push cannabis in the South. You know, they weren't supportive of it when we had leadership there because it wasn't acceptable because of the Bible Belt. But when you talk about medical, it opens the door up to conversation. I think we've got to strike the iron while it's hot on that. Number two, I think we've got new elections on the horizon starting next year, 2022. Number one, we need to maintain the balance in the Senate. So we'll need help to keep Warnock there. You know, I was up in Washington right after the inauguration. I spoke to he and Cory Booker. And I think generally the spirit is they're supportive, but we've got to strike the iron while it's hot to continue to push the administration to get this through. This is equally as important as the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill has a lot of money in it, but this is an industry that has been on our backs, on the backs of communities of color, and we need the restorative financial justice and restorative justice to occur as a result of it. The other piece is there are some statewide elections in Georgia, the governor's race, lieutenant governors, secretary of state, attorney general, all of those are up next year as well. I have to give a little credit to the current governor. He did support pushing medical. But what we all would like to see is a much more robust program. This program does have 20% minority participation required, which is very strong for the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia has only done generally 2% across all of its spends. In the city of Atlanta, of course, we do 40 and greater than 50% in many cases for minority participation as a requirement. That's a requirement we should have throughout the country, built on the same strategy of the affirmative action of the old. It created 40 millionaires when we built the renovations to the airport here in Atlanta. We could do the same thing with cannabis in all the plant touching as well as non-plant touching sectors for those who might have felonies in states that don't require, that will not allow the social equity to happen around those who have been incarcerated, but for states that do, perfectly fine. But I think there's so many strategies that we can take advantage of, and we can use Georgia as one of our test cases for the rest of the South. It's a little different from Florida, but I think Alabama, Mississippi, Virginia just went totally wrecked, but the others, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, will probably mimic what we see happening here in Georgia. So we need your best thinking on how, number one, we want to see this thing. If we had a perfect world, based on what you've seen on the West Coast, what you've seen in Colorado, Northwest, what would be better for us? Because there's a lot we can do with the power of Atlanta, leverage into the state. And it's a 10 million person state. Let's see if we can apply our best thinking to make this a cannabis innovation zone around financial and just classic justice and restorative justice that needs to occur. So that's really what I put on the table. And We ask for your support and partnership, and I'm here to work with anyone. I'll put my contact information in the chat.
Thank you, Special K. We appreciate it. We definitely appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, who has been a proponent of cannabis social equity in New Jersey and is not apologetic about letting folks know who he is. That is the Honorable State Assemblyman Jamel Holly, who is also, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is running for state senator in New Jersey. And so if you got a few extra dollars, please send him his way. Jamel, how are you today?
I'm doing well, John. How are you doing?
Good, good. Your thoughts on challenges, choices, and opportunity. And you got a lot to say here based on what's going on in your state. Please go.
Yeah, I mean, well, for New Jersey, I mean, we are headed in what I believe is the takeoff for marijuana. We finally got it through after the ballot referendum. We got the enabling legislation done. For those of you who don't know, when the original marijuana bill was introduced several years ago, it had no mention of social justice, social equity, or any of the tax dollars that would be derived from the sale purchases going back to the impacted communities. And while it's not 100%, what I will say is that we got at least 90% of what we were asking for. So we have the benchmarks for minorities, women, and disabled veterans. We have the sales tax. 70% of the sales tax will be given back to the impacted communities that we've identified on the hardest hit on the war on drugs. And then we have a program within the office to ensure that minorities, women, and disabled veterans obtain licenses. There's no caps on the conditional licenses. There's no caps on the micro licenses. The problem that I do see is the cap on the cultivated licenses, which I believe honestly is going to open up at some point, because I think at 37 cultivators, it's just not going to be enough. We're not going to be able to keep up with the demand. And so I see ourselves, I would say, in the next several months, once the commission begins to start to hammer down a lot of the regs, I see us opening up that cultivation and processing licenses much more than the 30 plus that we've identified in the bill. And what I always tell people is like, listen, I couldn't get 100% of what we wanted, right? But I got 90% of the pie. Let's fight over the 10% later. But given the industry and how it's being pushed, and with New York on our heels now, I think that New Jersey is going to open up more on the cultivation side. So that's about the only problem that I see. I see our good friend Faye Coleman is on the line, and she's been very good in terms of the minority section and the women's section in this arena. So it's good to see you, Faye, as well. But we anticipate in the legislature that we're going to have to revisit some of the language that we put into the original bill. But this, like you said, it's a growing industry. It's a work in progress. It's not 100%, but I'm very, very proud of John, and you know where we started and where we landed. We've come a long way here in New Jersey, and I'm proud of the work that me, my colleagues from the Legislative Black Caucus and the Latino Caucus were able to do.
You know, we're having the elected officials talk, and I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge. And so, Sean Ellie, I'm gonna take a little liberty because I'm a Virginia boy at heart. I'm from Danville, so you know what I mean. So when I see one of the sisters from, you know, the Tidewater area on the phone, I gotta at least say something like, "Girl, I'm so glad to see you. I don't know what to do because it's been a long time since I've been home." But now I come back to the official focus. This is the Honorable Charnelly Herring, and she is the Virginia delegate and the Democratic Majority Leader, and if I believe, the sponsor of the bill.
Yes.
So would you please talk to us about challenges, choices, and opportunity from your perspective in Virginia?
Thank you so much, John. Again, I'm Charnelly Herring. I was able to introduce this bill. It was a big deal. It was a big deal for Virginia, needless to say, because one of the things that we certainly wanted to do was address the disproportionate impact minorities have had, people of color, Black people, when it comes to over-policing and convictions. So the bill we finally had our reconvene session where we actually decided and voted to allow simple possession of marijuana, an ounce or less, before sales do start. We do have social equity ramifications in the bill in terms of licensing. We allowed social equity license for those who have prior convictions, those who come from economically depressed areas, as well as those areas that are over policed, which we've been able to obtain data when we talk about over policing and arrests. This was actually started, this bill, as a result of a JLARC study, which is a nonpartisan commission. It's called the Judicial Legislative and Audit Review Commission. Took a look at marijuana legalization. And so that's where the legislation was based on, as well as our governor had its own study. So most of the bill, unfortunately, is subject to reenactment. And that includes the licensing. So we have to go back and do it again next year. But the good thing is that we're on our road. We stood up also a different authority called the Cannabis Legalization Authority. So that will govern the regulations of cannabis in Virginia. But I'm excited about the prospect of bringing sort of restorative justice, it's been said before, but restorative justice into the fold. That was, a lot of opponents had issues with that, but I think it's important. And it's gonna benefit not only certain areas of Virginia, but also our farmers in Virginia who are looking forward to growing crops and changing used to be tobacco. And so I think that this is definitely going to benefit so many people.
Okay, is there, from your perspective, are y'all doing opt-in, opt-out? Does the state rules sort of guide all municipalities? Is that the process?
So what the decision is just to have a little bit over 400 license, and then of course localities still have their authority to use zoning if they so desire. But we didn't want some places, for example, to opt out, and then someone has already invested into a business, got their license, and all of a sudden their locality turns around and says, we're not doing it. So that's the way that the decision the legislature has made, and we'll see if it stays, because we have to do it again next year.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sam, you are
Do you be cooking that?
You are the Mercer County Commissioner.
Huh?
Please mute this woman. Thank you. You are the Mercer County Commissioner. You are responsible for dollars coming into the county. In Colorado, though, in New Jersey, it says that 70%
Oh, you make good shit. Okay.
towards communities impacted by the war on drugs. Is that money, from your perspective, because some counties, the money goes straight to the municipalities, and some counties it goes to the commission to then be dispersed to the municipalities. How do you see that money coming into Mercer County, for example?
Well, right now, the way that it's set up, John, and first of all, let me say, it's from a brother from Tappahannock, Virginia, from one Virginia to another. It's always good to see the folks from that Southern flag down there. But the way that it's coming in right now, it's really flowing to the municipalities, which I see some challenges, because even though we passed the law, we legalized statewide, our suburban towns, which are predominantly white many times, they're using that opt-out clause right now. And so we don't see them engaging at a very high level right now. I've talked to several of the mayors in our towns in Mercer County that have said that they're probably going to opt out until they can fix some of the legislation. But let me say, when you talk about the opportunities, JB, I really think that this is a great opportunity for us to begin to close that wealth gap in New Jersey. The new numbers in New Jersey just came out. And whereas it used to be that white families could put their hands on $309,000 of wealth, now it's $352,000 worth of wealth. And in Black families, still only $6,000 worth of wealth. and Hispanic families, still only $7,000 worth of wealth. So I see this as a real opportunity, but only if we create the legislation that makes it possible. As you know, on the last time we got together, we talked with Assemblyman Zwicker, and we've already gotten together to talk a little bit about how we can push the legislature to put in mandatory set-asides for licensure. Because although the numbers are, they've created a ripe field for folks to be able to get in. If you don't have the money to get into the game, or you don't have the right benefactors that are there pushing your name, you're not going to get into the game. And it's with 11 licenses already out in New Jersey, and the fact that none of them are headed by people of color, we've got to put some mandatory set-asides in place. We put set-asides in place for everything else in government. We need to be able to do it for this as well.
Sam, Trenton is going to be one of the cities that receives cannabis tax revenue. Any thoughts on how you, as a chair of the Mercer County Commission, do you have any thoughts on how that money could be utilized for a city that's been impacted the way Trenton has historically?
No question about it. We really need to look at utilizing those dollars for infrastructure. This city has been decimated because it is the capital city, and 40% of our land is untaxable because of state and local government, including county government, which sits on it and doesn't pay a pilot. So you have things that are breaking down in this city that need to be taken care of. The taxpayers in this city are paying a higher tax rate than folks in Princeton are, right? Because of what is actually sitting here. So to look at our building infrastructure, our streets infrastructure, parks infrastructure, all of the things that government would normally take care of, we need to be utilizing these dollars to do that, along with the restorative justice dollars, coupling that so that we're having impact along with the state. Because we just got our restorative justice bill passed that Verlena was working on and that Andrew Zwicker was working on. So in order to be able to have collective impact, we've got to be able to look at what local, county, and state government are doing and undergird that, support that with these dollars.
Talk to me about a concern that you and I have talked about privately offline, and that's your concern about employers hiring or firing or dismissing cannabis users, employees that have cannabis needs, be it medical or whatever. Any thoughts there to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to work at making sure that if it is not a crime to sell it, buy it, why should it be a crime to use it? Right. And so we've got people that need cannabis, cancer patients, people who are in the process now, but they are singled out anytime they have to go take a drug test. Right. And so we need to make sure that the legislation is there that protects their rights. Right. There needs to be their right to be able to utilize cannabis in order to deal with their medical issues. And along the lines of the fact that once it's legal, we really shouldn't be testing for this at all. You ask me, right? Because if it's legal, it's legal. And so we can basically target minorities or target folks that you don't like based on the use of cannabis. And so we want to be able to take that out of the equation altogether, just like we did when Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman put together ban the box, right? That you weren't allowed to ask anybody had you been locked up before. So we need to be able to take that out of the equation altogether.
Congressman, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Question for you. There's been a whole lot of conversation about the banking dollars moving from McConnell's desk to Schumer's desk. Do you have any thoughts about when some of that legislation might get out there? And our congressman here, Perlmutter, has been a big proponent of that. Any thoughts, and one of your colleagues, any thoughts about when that banking fiasco may be clear?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that, you got in politics, when you have a window, you've got to take advantage of it, right? And I know there's a lot of other stuff going on. We had COVID in front of us as the House Majority Leader spoke, and Ms. Holly, when those things come up, you got to run it through the door. And we've got a crisis in front of us right now with COVID that we're coming out of, but that's no excuse for not restoring the lives of all these people being impacted for generations, you know what I'm saying? And then number two, if money's coming in, it needs to come in through minority financial institutions, if it's going to come in through safe banking. And when it does, it needs to create a new investment platform that empowers each of these companies to have a new equity partner who is from a diverse background, from a challenge, not just zip code, you know, but truly from an underrepresented minority that has been impacted by the war on drugs. So we've got to kind of put all the pieces in there, but the Congress and Senate, they have the power right now to do it. And we might not have the power pass next year because the Republicans are going to spend $1 billion on this race here in Georgia. They're going to spend everything they have to try to win this one seat back. And it's not like our state really has gone very Democrat. They just voted against Trump. This go around, they could vote, you know, for their candidate. And they're even considering 2 Black candidates on the Republican side. And if they shift it in the Senate, then we lose the option again for who knows how many years. So we really got to try to push the administration to get us through. And, you know, Schumer's talking about it, but I think we need to also go towards the White House and try to, you know, continue to challenge the vice president and the president because they were hawkish on the conversation. And you know, in their defense, I understand what it can be like as an elected official in those moments when you're dealing with challenges. When we're dealing with crack, everybody was saying, fix it. You know, y'all figure it out. But now that we're out of the crack era, now that we've recognized the negative impacts of, you know, a crack rock versus, you know, pounds of, you know, of anything or kilos of cocaine, different sentences and all the numbers that you can weigh to 2 million, 3 million people that are impacted by the war on drugs who are in state and local jurisdictions. We need that push as well. If they would push to expunge records for anyone who has received federal funds for justice reform. So there's all kinds of plays that they could use right now, and they have the power to do it. So I think it's on the horizon, but if we don't keep talking about it and make it loud, it won't continue. And we probably do have to come from both parties. We've got to keep the Republicans in the boat. And I think what Snoop and the Koch brothers are doing, we got to have both sides, because it's really not about Democrat or Republican. It's about what's right and wrong, and really about, you know, Black and brown communities being disproportionately and negatively impacted for generations. And this is a way to kind of get it right in the same way that the country needs to get reparations right.
Delegate Herring, you have any additional thoughts?
No, I totally, and that's one thing that I did not mention. I'm glad it was said again, is that our bill did have expungement, and it's automatic. No one has to go to court. No one, you know, and that's something that I pushed hard for, is automatic expungement of marijuana convictions. We are actually now also, for those who have other sentences, that's for misdemeanors, but for felonies, we're also having a discussion about resentencing. This is again about righting what has been done so wrong for so long, and the economic impact that has been felt by families, by empowering, you know, in an industry, empowering people to have access to capital, to have access to an opportunity, to a license, and to build a business, I think is right. And I'm glad to see other states doing it as well. So.
Okay. Commissioner Friedman, anything else you'd like to share?
I was going to say that, you know, dealing with the banking component is directly on point. Some of the programs that we feel that we could really take over at the county, and creating incubators for those who want to build consumption lounges and being able to give them financial backing, won't allow us to do that because of the federal banking laws, right? And so because it might be legal in New Jersey, we haven't dealt with it federally yet, and so we still can't provide that level of support. And that's something that counties really could do, no matter if they're going to work it very heavily at the in the local municipalities, and if the state still really wants to control the licensure portion of it. We really need to be able to deal with that so that we can provide opportunities for new business owners that want to get into the game, and we can use our funds to be able to do it.
Well, you know, the political side is so important, but I guess my question to all of you is that, did we really need legislation, or from your perspective, is there a will within the industry to do the right thing? And will each one of y'all take a minute and just give us your thought?
Well, I will say we had to do legislation. Virginia had some of the most repressive laws when it just, you know, we're reforming, we're changing, but we certainly had to have legislation in Virginia because it's just illegal unless the federal government makes a change and takes it off the schedule. Legislation was necessary, and the legislation is still necessary until we strike down, and that's going to take a while, the institutionalized racism that exists. We have to move in a way that's constitutional and to strike down those barriers that exist in our society that have been in place for a very long time. So that's my answer. We had to.
Okay, and so I'm gonna move from that and Kwanzaa, ask you a different question. Later on today, we're going to talk about this National Black Cannabis Equity Alliance that is trying to get everybody on this call and everybody out there in the clouds to come and let's be part of not a unifying body, but a collaborating body that is trying to move the conversation forward. Any thoughts about a need for something like that?
I definitely agree that there is a need for us to take a much more focused approach. You know, this is almost to the point of being like a heavy duty lobby effort. It's a lobby effort, but it has to have business savvy and sophistication running alongside, because you have to have a carrot and a stick. There's some people who say we're looking for partners, but we just need someone who can bring 2 million to the table. So there's a certain group in our networks, our shared networks, who are the $2 million people or greater. They're ready to go. They can bring their own capital. They know how to raise capital. Then there are others who are due an opportunity, but we've got to create the pathway to that opportunity. And we've got everything in between. And that's actually what we have to figure out how we approach. You know, there may be people who've been impacted by the war on drugs and they're arrested, but their children are out. So what do we do about giving them a new opportunity in this conversation? So it's up to all of us. We're family, right? And if we think about it like a family, and in many other cultures, and no offense to anyone else who's on this phone who happens not to be African American or Latino, but there are other communities that own, you know, large portions of other sectors, sometimes in a city, sometimes in a country, sometimes globally. You know, whether it be banking and finance, whether it be media, whether it be in real estate in some parts of the world, you see like these 5 families in this particular community owns all the hotels. And, you know, so I think this is one, you know, similar to content creation, as we're starting to see, is one that we should be able to garner an unfair share for communities of color. And I think our intent should be around that. And I'm 100% committed to partnering with everyone, because I can't take it all. I don't want to eat the whole pie. I want everyone to have a piece of this pie because we all deserve it. And the more we put in, just like the Silicon Valley effect, as they talk about out there, the more tech companies beget more tech companies. So the more cannabis companies we create and entrepreneurs we create, hopefully they will create future generations of entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you, our elected officials, and joining us on this conversation. And so now we move to the panel discussion, the regulator's perspective. And what better discussion, what better people to have on that than Dasheeda Dawson, chairperson of the Cannabis Regulators of Color, who has been doing, I'm not sure she's worked in every state, but she's worked in a lot of states, helping a lot of states, giving information based on what she's seen. And that's what happens when you're in the room and you don't then hoard information, but you come out the room and you share that information. And I'm so proud of her, not only in her job as a regulator, but also as a woman to watch in the industry. Dasheeda, tell us what you see from your perspective on challenges, choices, and opportunity in the cannabis landscape. Take your mute button off. There you go.
Yes, I am unmuted. Hi, John. Thank you so much for a warm welcome. I have been in the chat room, so I'm excited to have heard from so many people. And I won't reiterate a lot of the thoughts that have been said, but there's a lot that we have learned. I'm excited to be joining Ashley on this panel because we're constantly learning from Colorado and Denver. So like John said, I crossed over into the cannabis industry about 5 years ago in the role of an executive consultant, strategist, and really a thought leader. And I've worked with multiple cannabis operations, municipalities, special interest groups, and media outlets. And I can honestly say that from seed to solution, I feel like I've seen every aspect of the cannabis industry. And part of the reason why I crossed over into the public sector was really my work with municipalities on the ground in New York, in New Jersey, and seeing that while you may pass great legislation, and shout out to my hometowns, I'm Brooklyn born, Jersey educated, really the implementation piece of it was so important. So being only the third Black woman in the country to hold a lead cannabis regulatory role, quickly kind of band together with other women of color who are cannabis regulators, and we formed the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition. I have to always shout out to here because he put us together in a space, and September of 2020 we launched. And we have been called the architects of cannabis policy reform and equity-centered legalization. So it includes Toy Hutchinson and Danielle Perry out of Illinois, Shalene Title out of Massachusetts, countless regulators in California, particularly Kat Packer in LA, and myself and Dr. Rachel Knox in Oregon. So what I'll highlight today are some of the things that we've been working on, both at the federal level, but also amassing all of our insights across being in states that have tried to implement equity programming, or in states like Oregon where they're mature and forgot the equity, although the intention may have been to have a sensible regulation and to include small business, they didn't intentionally look at it from some of the racial disparities. So ever since being enrolled, it's been now about a year, I've been excited because we've been able to transform something that's been more of a foundation. Oregon, for the most part, did come out of the gate looking to have sensible regulations. It wasn't one of those high barrier markets to enter. And by doing so, as a result, it is a bit more equitable in its approach. But I think certainly understanding what could be done with cannabis legalization, Oregon definitely missed the mark by not having a cannabis equity designation or track in terms of licensing, but in terms of some of the other things we've talked about today. We're excited because we have a bill, House Bill 3112 now, that's our Cannabis Equity Act, that helps to remedy some of that, and we've learned across the country. And I shout out the CRCC for bringing their insights. But within the city, we are specifically aimed at being the leading regulatory management framework that's actually operationally designed to deliver on the reparative and restorative potential of cannabis decriminalization and legalization. And by that, I mean that it's actually an equity-centered regulatory model. A lot of regulatory agencies feel that they have to be neutral. Like you can't even say whether you support legalization or whether or not it should be equity. And I'd kind of like to reiterate that really that's our job. Our job is as government officials to ensure that there is equity in the resources and revenue that the government has for its constituents. And so one of the biggest things that we're learning is we need to think broader about it. We've focused a lot on the social equity piece because the laws have been missing and the policies have been missing equity. But that's, like Faye said, about what social equity kind of focuses on. When we think about equity within the cannabis health equity movement, we're talking about health equity, and that's total equity. And it's about the 4 pillars of well-being that span, yes, social equity, but environmental, human equity, and economic as well. And I think everyone talking today has certainly pulled out why we have to think broader, but I also want to make sure that we understand that these things are already defined. They're defined as to be the pillars of our well-being. And if we want that for our communities, then we need to be defining it more outright as we talk about equity in the law. Some of the things that we've also discussed as the CRCC are the principles of governance that we've seen missing across the states that have legalized. And some may say that even at the federal level, we still struggle with this, but we have 5 in particular that we're really focused on: transparency, which we talked about today a lot, about the processes; accountability, there's been a lack thereof. I can even call out the city of Portland. yes, in 2016 voted, had great legislation, first city to have a grant program tied to cannabis tax revenue. However, 80% of the cannabis tax revenue was still going to public safety or police bureau. And it wasn't until last year that the city council decided to change that and now have reinvested and done more investment in social equity and educational development initiatives or SEED initiatives. We need more consistency. I think we've, again, been defining social equity very differently based on the market. So I'm excited about the work that John's doing, because we do need to aggregate everything together in a way that becomes more like a chorus. And we need more representation. Like I said, I was only the third, and thankfully with New Jersey, we have more people of color getting into areas of regulatory oversight, but that has been missing more or less. And I think that it's not necessarily a substitute for any other element, but the formal inclusion of Black, Brown, Indigenous folks and women at the top levels actually engaged in cannabis policymaking is one of the most crucial parts of this in order to see this work. And then last, using evidence. We talked a lot about data, and that's something that's been missing. And it's something that we're all collectively as a coalition hoping to fill in the gaps with white papers and bringing the data collectively. I love what Eric Foster talked about, because it is like, I've been working in every market and it's hard to keep up now that more are getting online, and sometimes there's false information. And so what's the actual state collecting, and how does that actually work to looking at the return on equity investment is what I've been calling. And then the next thing I guess I'll talk about is the statutory law versus the regulatory policy.
You're going into Ashley's time.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I didn't know what time I had, but yeah, go ahead.
No, you're going to Ashley's time, but finish up real quick, and then I'll give Ashley a couple extra minutes.
Sure, no problem. What I will say is that we have been making some mistakes, and I want us to get together on trying to eliminate some of the same mistakes. We can do a lot in the statutory, but sometimes it actually ties the hands of the regulators, which is more on the policy side. There are also a few, opportunities for us to create better framework in the statutory. So last thing I'll say is, I love where we got to with New Jersey, but without mechanisms for accountability already set up in the framework, sometimes the execution is really hard to get at. And folks have already talked about municipalities that will do their own thing, or lack of equity-centered leadership there causes them to ultimately not support the communities that we're trying to really hit in our equity policy.
Okay, so now we're talking about a municipality that is equity-centered, a municipality that is social equity focused. And for those who don't know, their social equity ordinances are before City Council today. And if these ordinances are passed, the Mayor Hancock, who y'all met early, will sign them tomorrow. So would y'all please welcome to the conversation my good friend and sister in crime here in Colorado, or sister in social equity positive efforts, Ashley Kilroy, who is the Director of Excise and License for the City of Denver. Ashley, welcome.
Very good. Thank you, John. I'm honored to sit on a panel with Dasheeda, and good to see you. So thanks for having me. And it's been great listening to everyone. And I liked how Dasheeda put it, a lot of this stuff that we hear and we talk about, and we're hearing similar things when I hear all of you speak over these last couple of hours, but it's sort of, as you said, like a chorus, hearing maybe people using different terminology and talking about different ways to do things. My role is as a regulator, and I don't have like the wide industry experience like Dasheeda has. I was, I think, the first kind of real cannabis regulator, because Colorado legalized. We started recreational sales on January 1st, 2014. And Mayor Hancock had asked me, can you come do this? Like about 2 weeks before it started happening. So I can talk to you about what John was just mentioning, the bills that we have before council right now. Like I said, 2014, January 2014, we were sort of first out of the gate. We didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know if the feds were going to come shut us down. We didn't know if they really were going to let us do this. We were cautious. We were following kind of state law, and we built a regulatory framework that what we felt did what the Cole Memorandum directed us to do, to have strict rules and robust enforcement. Fast forward 6 or 7 years later, we see a multi-billion-dollar industry, as John and the mayor mentioned, in Colorado. The Colorado industry has seen over $10 billion in sales since that January 1st, 2014, and $2.2 billion in sales just during the pandemic alone, starting in March. So fast forward to all this, all of the other conversations we started seeing going around the country. A couple of years ago, we started really working in and honing in on the equity piece and backtracking and making up for mistakes that we had made from the beginning. Some of the first stuff we did, it kind of what some of you have talked about, and John has said, we don't always have to wait on legislation. Let's start doing things now. Let's do what we can do now, whether it's making sure we're talking to the industry, or as John says, hold the industry accountable and have an industry report card, or like Malcolm was talking about, people come to John's meetings and go to the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and talk about how can we start a business. In the regulatory world, what we did also was the tax dollars, as the mayor talked about, utilizing tax dollars in neighborhoods that have been historically marginalized communities, and affordable housing and some youth programs. We also did the expungements too a couple of years ago. Where we are right now tonight, and we hope it's going to pass, we think it's going to pass. We've got a set of new bills in front of City Council that John was instrumental in helping us work on. First of all, in Colorado, our standard license stows, grows, manufacturers, and testing facilities. Stores and grows have been under a moratorium now since 2016. We have not issued new store and grow licenses since 2016. Under the old law that one of the council people put in place, we were supposed to release those licenses pursuant to a lottery. And what we're proposing is we don't do the lottery, and we release those new licenses only to social equity applicants for a period of 6 years. So those new stores and grows in Denver are only to go, if this passes tonight, the mayor signs tomorrow, to social equity applicants for 6 years. Then what we're also doing in this package is we have some new state law licenses that the state adopted in 2019, which included hospitality, so clubs, and included delivery. And jurisdictions have the right to opt in or not, opt in or opt out. And so we are recommending, and we hope council's going to sign it tonight, that we opt in to hospitality. And again, those new license types for 6 years, 6-year exclusivity for social equity applicants only. And then the delivery licenses, there's a little more nuance there. It's basically sort of 3 years exclusivity for our social equity applicants. So John says we don't always have to wait on legislation, but I think as Roz was saying too, sometimes you can have good and bad policy, and we hope this policy is the foundation of some good policy. And like what I said this morning when I talked to the mayor earlier, after this bill passes, the hard part starts, because then that's going to be, this has been hard enough. This 2 years has been pretty challenging. Listening to everybody and gathering all the information. And we still have people who just don't even want us to expand marijuana to begin with. We still have people who are really concerned about youth usage and public health issues. So it's been a real balance. Hopefully we get that passed tonight. The mayor signs it tomorrow. And then we've got to work on implementation, because our intent to have these great bills is not impact, right? We have to do the implementation piece, and we've got some things set up for how we're going to implement it. We've got, plan in place for how we're going to collect the data on the back end. We've been talking about the access to capital. We've been talking about wraparound services. We are going to be waiving fees. We are going to have a cannabis process navigator who will help our social equity applicants navigate the system. So I will wrap up and just kind of summarize real quickly, and then John, if you have more questions, and if Dasheeda wants to chime in too. Like we said too, if there's anybody in this call who's interested in applying for one of these new license types in Denver, later John has a breakout session with our Denver cannabis process navigator named Joey Pena, and he's the person who's going to help people kind of get through the processes and connect them to resources. Maybe you could attend that breakout session, but always feel free to contact me or John, get us in touch, and we can start meeting and talking and seeing what you're interested in and how we can walk this path together.
All right, lady, thank you so much for giving us the regulator's perspective. It is always good to see sisters who are working hard together, no matter what state they may find themselves in. And so we're going to now move to something that many of you have been asking about, and that is access to capital. And our first presenter on access to capital conversation is Jarrell Register, Managing Director of the Curio Wellness BWMV Fund. Jarrell, welcome to the conversation, and share with us what y'all are doing with that $30 million, bro.
Sure. So hi, everybody. I really appreciate the commentary, particularly a little more than an hour ago, that really talked about the importance of combining capital with what I'll call support services to make sure that licensees find success as they develop their new businesses. That appreciation really is manifest in the structure of the Curio WMBE Fund. The spirit of the fund is to create business ownership opportunities for diverse entrepreneurs in the cannabis space, focus specifically in the dispensary market by sponsoring franchisees of Curio's wellness center concept. So what we've done is build a franchise opportunity based on Curio's existing wellness center here in the Maryland market that really is designed to provide some over the top marketing and brand support, but really the meat and substance of the support that it provides is around the operational compliance and regulatory aspects of the business, as well as some of the financial management and bookkeeping parts. Really what we found as we looked for an opportunity to sponsor diverse entrepreneurs was not only a need for access to capital, which is very real, but also a need to be able to leverage a network of services to compete with multi-state operators or other multi-unit operators in the dispensary market so that they could develop solid supply chain reliability, strong inventory management, regulatory compliance that didn't cause them to be overly burdened and allowed them to really focus on the customer experience and the financial performance of their store. So we paired the franchising element with the $30 million fund John mentioned around the idea that if we can deploy capital in a way that provides a path to 100% ownership for these diverse entrepreneurs, we'll really have created a path to creating generational wealth in the marketplace for diverse business owners. So the fund is structured such that we provide a combination of direct equity investment and access to lending products, such that a franchisee, in our case, can go from owning 60% of the store from day one and really move towards a path of buying the fund's 40% share as the business hits steady state. And in using that structure, we've created an opportunity to generate an attractive investor return to draw that capital to market, but also established a pathway for that franchisee to own an asset outright with limited capital outlay on their part at the start, based on the principle that we know there are diverse entrepreneurs with the skill set and wherewithal to manage and develop a business. But we really just wanted to be able to remove that access to capital barrier that's felt acutely both in the diverse entrepreneurship market, but also particularly here in cannabis.
Okay, thank you. Our next social equity fund is led by Tavares King, CEO of Suite 420 Access. Tavares?
Oh yeah, good afternoon, everybody.
Share with us your thoughts on cannabis social equity and the access to capital and the challenges, choices, and opportunity in this industry.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to present, John. I really appreciate it. I think this is truly a powerful thing, getting everybody together to talk about a specific cause. I'll be as short as possible. I'll give you a who, a how, and a why. And with that, who am I? John just mentioned, JB just mentioned, I'm Tavares King, CEO of Suite 420 Access, and we are a minority-owned financing company that provides capital to minority-owned cannabis companies. We try to help them, we support them by helping them retain their ownership. A little bit more about me. I grew up in Georgia, went to Georgia, played football there, go Dogs. Was drafted by the Denver Broncos. Spent most of my 7-year career with the New York Giants, and I got into the cannabis space while I was playing. As many of you know, football is a game that has a 100% injury rate. We kind of just do this all day, and I began noticing my teammates and close friends get addicted to pain pills and things like that. So I wanted to give them an alternative to that. It's a close friend of mine, music producer, Dallas Austin, and I started CBD company Rowdy Wellness in Atlanta, and it's been a blessing to many people. We work with the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, which is the spinal center in Atlanta. We work with the Reed Cliff School of Autism and many others. But as many of you have mentioned before, you know, being a minority-owned company comes with its challenges and obstacles and hurdles, and that's why I'm excited to be a part of Sweet 420 Access. And I'm excited for the launch of Sweet 420 Access so that we can help other minority companies, you know, gain a seat at the cannabis table. How do we do this? You know, as mentioned before, finding access to capital is probably one of the biggest hurdles, if not the biggest hurdle in the industry. And because of systematic inequality, it's even harder for minority cannabis businesses to thrive. So again, and knowing, you know, the challenges firsthand, you know, we want to be an advocate. We want to be here to help minority cannabis entrepreneurs grow and retain ownership. You know, we're not asking for a piece of your pie. You know, we're just here to ensure that the pie gets baked. And this is done through relationships we have with Scott's Miracle Grow, Hawthorne Gardening. You know, they're big on inclusion, and you know, they're big on taking those steps towards inclusion. And that's some other things that we do are things like equipment finance and real estate financing, working capital, growth capital, things like that. So our goal is to raise about $50 million to help fuel these companies so that they can achieve their dreams. And of course, you know, the big question everybody has is why thing to do. It's the right time to do it. Our country's in an opioid crisis. The misuse of opioids is at an all-time high, and you know, the war on drugs, we all know how that affected our community drastically. It's been mentioned before. So cannabis is an avenue that can, you know, combat that and can combat opioids. So as cannabis laws, narratives and stigmas change drastically, you know, that opens doors for minorities to sit at a table where there were previously no seats at all. So here at Sweet 420 Access, our mission is to equal that playing field through, again, our experiences, our relationships with so many of you in this meeting room, which is why I think this is so powerful, and other various cannabis outlets. When it comes down to it, we want to promote equitable access to capital for minority-owned cannabis companies, and just give everybody a chance to have a seat at the table again, and not just to have a seat at the table, but to thrive in this industry and to stay alive in this industry and just to grow and succeed.
Okay. Thank you, Tavares. You know, our next speaker, I remember when he was in high school, was considered one of the best basketball players in the country. Then I saw him go on to University of Michigan with the Fab Five and become an All-American there. And then I saw him go into the NBA and be a significant player with several teams. And now he's gone from a Fast Five to a Fantastic One, working with folks trying to bring social equity into the industry. Would y'all please welcome Chris Weber, who is with the Weber Wild Fund, who's also going to talk about Weber Wellness. Good to see you, young brother, and good thing I have my jump shot of basketball because we'd be out there on the hoops today, but today is let's take care of some other business. I'm glad to see that smile, and Chauncey told me to tell you hello. So having said that, Chris, welcome to the conversation and share with us about your mission, your vision for Weber Wild and Weber Wellness from a social equity and a access to capital perspective.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And, you know, John, my knees are bad, so I have to foul you because I can't hoop no more. So I'm straight up fouling from now on. But I thank you for having me on here. And it's a pleasure to be with all the other good folks on here. And, you know, I just know from you being on here, I respect work in your admiration. And, you know, it's an honor for me to be in any space with our people trying to make change in any business, in any culture, and in any thing. And so it's an honor for me to be here. I'm kind of like Tavares. You know, he played football, and as he said, it's 100% of injuries. And truthfully, what those guys do in football is far more injury prone than what we do in basketball. However, I played basketball professionally about 15 years. And so for a long time, you know, you have injury, you have swelling all the time. And when you have these injuries, it's a culture of just giving you a pill. You don't even have to ask what it is. They'll just say, maybe you have to eat before this, so I didn't drink milk and take this. So I started developing ulcers. I started, you know, our schedule was, you know, we have a game every other day. We'll play a game 7:30. We'll finish the game at 10:30, get on the plane. About 12, get to the next city, about 3. And how do you go to sleep? How do you have sleep management, pain management, mood management? And so for myself, and seeing how these situations affected, you know, my friends, my brothers adversely when we tried to self-medicate, I really started looking for the answers. And I was blessed enough to have access to good doctors to where I could trust their track record. And in came cannabis, CBD, other oils and things like that. And so just personally on this whole journey that we're all on, I'm glad that at the end of the day, with the success of everybody on here, as we get access, as we work, as we go forward, that the whole other side of it is that our people will have alternative to medicines. Because so many times we're prescribed medicines that don't necessarily benefit us in ways maybe that's been promoted. So that's how I got into the business, and I was able through partnerships, through business, to have Weber Wellness, which does services the industry in many ways, but specifically cannabis, and partnering, whether it was vertical operations in California and other places, to be able to have a partner like Jason Wild. So I was in all of these meetings, and I was meeting different people and myself, and figuring that I have really good partners in which I could raise money and access with. I saw how there was no one in the meetings that looked like myself. I saw how hard it was for friends of mine that didn't happen to play basketball or didn't happen to do something else, but were wonderful, smart, hardworking individuals, couldn't get access, whether it's the capital, infrastructural, information, other things. And so it was really frustrating for myself personally. And then also, I just couldn't imagine, you know, what everyone else is going through. And I can because of business, but that's kind of how I got it started. So Jason, I had a conversation with him. We've done business together. I kind of understood the type of person that he was, where I could have an honest conversation. And I tell you, I had one of the most brutal and honest conversations that I've ever had. And he was right on pace with me, right on step, right in line, and actually led the way in saying, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and let's do this together. And so I'm excited to have a partner with him. We have a fund that's $100 million. What we're doing is trying to grant access to individuals in the business from the smallest levels to the largest levels. Of course, we're doing lending and equity investment. But also what I think that's unique about this is not just cold lending, it's also I want to make sure that he brought his infrastructure in there, you know, to make sure that you get the best opportunities from the problem solving that his companies have gone through in the past. And I believe that's what's most important, is I've seen predatory lending and other things where, you know, the lender wants you to fail, and it's a difference in this. And so I'm proud to be on this call. Hopefully our fund can help. No, not hopefully, God willing, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have an impact and be able to empower some hardworking, wonderful, smart individuals, because at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. It's just looking at people's business plan and trusting their work ethic. And I always say this to other people, investing in those that don't get access, you know, you're not dying on the cross, you're not doing anything that special, because really all you're going to is unmined ground. That's it. it's ground over here with diamonds and gold in it. These people are this, and they're just not familiar with this territory. And while they're scared to navigate it, hopefully myself, hopefully others can encourage people to come and do it. And in the meantime, if not, create our own wealth and go right after it. And that's what I plan to do, not only with the Jason Wild Fund that I have, the Weber Wild Fund, but independently, I make sure that we work only in diversity and that we put our money where our mouth is. And so thank you for allowing me some time to talk on this call.
That's not a problem. And Chris, just know that as a former player, former pro athlete, and when the ball was red, white, and blue, I appreciate seeing our athletes step up and do the right thing. You and Bars and Jarrell, y'all are just godsend to us. Many in the industry have said access to capital is one of our #1 issues. And so to be able to have 3 Black men and women coming shortly, to be able to send our folks to show them that there's a pathway is very important. So we applaud all of what the 3 of you are doing in that area. And so now we're having what we call, I made the conversation today like a basketball game. You come in, you warm up, which is the pregame, and then you have the game itself. And then for whatever purposes, if the score is tied at the end, it's overtime. So Roz and I are getting ready to take y'all into overtime. And at overtime, we have about 7 or 8 different breakout sessions for you. One is on delivery with Devin Alexander. Another one is on expungement with Danielle Butler. There's one on navigating the space with Joey Pena. There's one on insurance with James Jackson. One on accounting with Jim Marty. One on the Black community and hemp with Faye Coleman. There's one on women of color in the cannabis industry with Gia Moron. Then there's education and training with Kevin Ford. And then there's the future of cannabis infrastructure with August Alexander, who I think may be ill today. And then there's ancillary opportunities, 5 ways for the Black communities to increase access and profitability with Ernest Tony. If you haven't got on a breakout room yet, you have a couple minutes to do that. And so, but I want to encourage you to get to those breakout rooms because there's going to be a lot of information. If you came into this session with 3 or 4 people, don't all of y'all go to the same breakout room. Split them up, send them to some different places so that you can end up gathering the intellectual property. You will be in these breakout rooms from now until 5:30. When we come back at 5:30, we'll hear from the Blizzy Cannabis Magazine, the Marijuana Hall of Fame, talk a little bit about the National Black Cannabis Equity Alliance, the report card, the podcast is Black Bud Time, and the Social Equity Zoom Tour in Search of Cannabis Social Equity. So now you should be moving towards these breakout rooms. And so to my technical assistance people, bring these folks into their breakout rooms, and we'll see you at 5:30.